the regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners this March 12th, 2019. And all 5 commissioners are present for this meeting in a legal sense. But Commissioner Farr is calling in. And Commissioner Farr, do you want to just tell us where you are and anything about the technology of communicating with you?
Communication sounds clear and easy. I am on the campus of Wilmington College in Ohio. It's a wonderful place to be, but I would much rather be with you all.
Very good. And a lot of the snow is dissipating, so things are looking up for us, I hope.
May I say something?
I'm certainly glad to hear that. There is zero snow here.
Yeah, Commissioner Burney, go ahead.
Commissioner Farr, I think this is very dramatic of you to demonstrate just because at our last meeting you were the only one physically present and all of us were snowed out, and you just want to show us you can do the same thing.
I am striving for balance in government.
Very good. Yeah, that's true. Last time all 4 of us were on the phone and Commissioner Farr was the only one in the room. So I just wanted to go over our adjustments to the agenda, item 1. And first and foremost, I want to make sure everyone knows we're having just one executive session today, and that will be on the AFSCME matter. So for the public, we're just letting the commissioners know that we're only going to be taking up one item that's not going to be in front of the public today, and that will be our executive session dealing with the AFSCME matter. Secondly, I need all commissioners to know that there will be a 10 a.m. time certain, so we'll stop our meeting wherever we are at 10 o'clock and have our legislative update, and our Director of Government Affairs, Manager of Government Affairs, Alex Kyler, will be coming and talking with us about the legislative update. Another thing is that we have the tomorrow's meeting will entirely be in the Lane County Board of Commissioners conference room, not here, but in the conference room. We won't have public comment up there, but if public wants to watch us in the public portion of that meeting, they can. But a lot of that meeting tomorrow is going to be executive session, talking about litigation and other things that we talk about in executive session. Another thing is that I'm aware that, well, I wanted to pull the item on 6A2 on our consent calendar. That's the investment matter. And I know there's other commissioners that have told Ms. Jones, our board coordinator, that they want to pull things from the agenda, consent calendar. So I'll call on Commissioner Burney. I know you have 2 items at least.
I have 2, but you mentioned 1. So I have 1. If we could do that with 6AC also, I believe. Hold on. 6.
6C. 6C5.
Hold on, we're getting there. 6C5. Thank you very much.
So we'll have those 2 pulled for separate discussion, and we may need staff for those. We may not need staff. I know Ms. Moody is available to substitute for Mr. Tintle on item 6A2, and I don't know if Ms. Sasha Sartanian is available or not. Oh, very good. Thank you for waving out there. So if we need to take that up. I'm not aware of any emergency business. And 2 more things. One is I'd like to thank our vice chair for running the agenda meeting that brought us this agenda. So when the chair can't be in on all these meetings, and the vice chair is running things, and she's the one that set up this whole agenda. I was on the phone far away, but she's the one that gets the credit and or other things for this agenda. It's a messed up agenda, I know. No. So And last but not least, I just want to mention that we were informed earlier today that today is the 30th birthday of the World Wide Web. Yes, Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web 30 years ago today, intended to be increasing communication between the world's great universities.
I thought Al Gore did that.
Well, yeah, other people think that, but the World Wide Web says differently. So, okay, any other adjustments by staff or commissioners to the agenda? Okay, at this time then we will be turning to our public comment, item number 2. Our friends in the television said we had to do that 3 times. So I'm going to be calling on people. Please come forward after I read your name. And if you're not sitting up close to the front of the room, please move to the front of the room. First, we're going to have Julie Bowers. And please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. Give your name and address, and then we'll give you 3 minutes. And we're trying something new today, and that is we have a timer that we borrowed from the city of Eugene. I'm not sure, does anyone know how to start the timer? That's another problem. We have a timer, but
Green button?
Sarah's waving.
press green.
Diana's going to be running.
I know how, Mr. Chair.
Okay, how do you do that?
You're not here.
No? Okay.
Just press green and then it goes?
Diana will do it. Diana's taking care of it. She's
Oh, there she is, okay. Okay, please go ahead.
My name is Julie Bowers. I am the Executive Director of the North Skunk River Greenbelt Association, commonly known as Workin' Bridges. My address is 4142 Holt Road, Holt, Michigan. Our corporate address is P.O. Box 332 in Grinnell, Iowa, and we own the Hayden Railroad Bridge in Springfield, Lane County, Oregon. I am here today. Thank you, folks, for letting me scoot in because we are having a celebration at the bridge to open it. It now has planks and rail, almost. They got quite a crew out there. But the reason I'm here with the county is because I do want to invite the commissioners out there to see what we have out there, and that we still need a few things from you all as we're working forward on this the growth boundary area. We are working with eWeb and Lane County to accumulate several more parcels of land on the county side that would tie into the Hayden Bridge water access, and eventually there will be a park there. I hope I don't have to gift it to you. I hope that we can make it part of the master plan for the county. But in the meantime, we are very happy out there, and I'm sorry that you can't make it out because I know you're so busy from the snowstorm. I didn't bring it from Iowa, I swear. You didn't get a polar vortex with it, so it wasn't from us. But thank you so much Commissioner, for supporting our efforts over the last 3 years. You really, every time we emailed, you responded. And that was very important. Now, Commissioner Burney is in the area, and we've invited him out to visit the area, and it's going to be open today. I'll be back in May, and we'll continue with benches and park-like activities. The bollards are going in, and we hope that that everyone enjoys this very rare historic cast iron bridge from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. Any questions?
Nope. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, and anytime you want to come out and set that on your agenda or let us on your agenda to figure out handicap parking, cut through curbs, landlocked access, et cetera, we would like to make that happen. Maybe May.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Zhenya Liebman, and followed by a trio of speakers from Florence. Welcome, and if you give your name and your address, and then we'll start the timer at 3 minutes.
Zhenya Liebman, and I live at 1093 Green Meadows Avenue in Junction City.
Okay, and I see our timer is starting now. There you go. Okay. Go for it.
Okay. I'm here to speak on behalf of having Lane County withdraw from the AOCC. And the rationale is that in recent headlines, I read that our U.S. Senators Wyden and Merkley and Congressman DeFazio worked very hard towards the passage of what's called the Wildlands Bill, which protects our wilderness areas and scenic rivers such as our Devil's Staircase and historic sites and much more. This bill passed both houses with broad, diverse coalitions, 92-8 in the Senate and 363-62 in the House. I don't think motherhood and apple pie could do better. So this was a strong voice for conservation and stewardship of public land. And it is in stark contrast to the efforts of the AOCC. Their lobbying efforts and lawsuits run at cross purposes to the efforts of our U.S. senators and congressmen. Now, membership in the AOCC is not needed for purposes of funding. The SRS payments are provided to these counties to supplement lower levels of logging. And the major actors in trying to make the SRS payments more permanent are our own senators and congressmen. So I feel our strongest support should be for them as they act in our best interests. And very importantly, I think we could make much better use of the money that now goes to AOCC. How about a rural patrol or something towards homelessness or for constituent services? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, there are 3 people I've been told want to speak together. And so please come up, and you can have 3 minutes each, or you can have 3 minutes together. So I'll, okay, then I'd rather have you go 3 minutes each, and we'll have start with Mr. Zinn. Just give your name and where you live, and then we'll give you 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jimmy Zinn. I am a homeowner residing at 88579 Collard Loop over in West County, a Florence post office. We're here today because there was an item on this afternoon's agenda concerning local access roads, and we have an interest in that. I see that it's been pulled, but that's okay because we don't think Collard Lake Road is a local access road in the first place. At root, it's our strong belief that Collard Lake Road is not a local access road. That's a misnomer, as the road was in fact accepted by the county by an action of this board on February the 18th, 1976. A reading of the minutes of that meeting makes this absolutely clear. The decision was unanimous, it was unconditional, and perhaps unique for government, it was unambiguous. On that basis alone, Collard Lake Road is a county road. And when you consider that this action was taken by the board when there were only 2 subdivisions and some 40 home sites involved, and yet the board approved the action. Over the years since then, the county has permitted and continues to permit ongoing development that was and is completely dependent upon this county road. There are now 6 subdivisions off of Collard Lake Road with over 100 homes. And building activity, permitted building activity continues apace. This is not a little local access lane that serves a few houses. It has never been that. In summary, it's become common for people to feel cynical about government. So often decisions are made based on what is expedient or easy rather than what is right. Well, there's been a long history of contention on this subject. We would suggest that it is time for this board to step up and simply do what's right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And we are having a discussion of local access roads later today. And so we have Marilyn, followed by Skip Thompson. Just give your name, sir, and
Skip Thompson, and I live at 6042 Collard Lake Way in Florence.
wonderful.
Okay. My wife and I own our own home on Collard Lake Way, and we're among the many homeowners who depend on Collard Lake Road for our daily in and out. I would like to emphasize that the concern carried by about the 100 homeowners and 300 residents about the confusion of Collard Lake Road being treated as though it's a local access road. Mr. Zinn has already made it clear that Collard Lake Road was accepted unanimously by the county as a county road in 1976. And Collard Lake Road definitely deserves to be a county road. Not only does it serve 128 lots and 6 permitted subdivisions and another 13 lots outside of those subdivisions, but it also serves the Cedar Water District and is the only way for them to reach their huge water tower that serves all 6 subdivisions. I'd like to emphasize that the residents here are very concerned about this access remaining dependable, since our drinking water, all of our water actually, is completely dependent on it. Collard Lake Road is also the only way that Cedar Water District can get to Collard Lake itself, where they need to do their monthly or periodic water quality checks. It also provides the way in and out for their heavy equipment, like their dump trucks and excavators, and hauling occasional large loads of rock and equipment necessary to maintain and upgrade the water line that's buried in the whole length of that road. It also serves as access to all of the fire hydrants along that length of the road, both for their maintenance and for use in emergency. Collard Lake Road also serves any and all emergency vehicles that need access to every portion of the 6 subdivisions. Collard Lake Road is our only way in and out of that subdivision. There are no alternative routes. So if something happens to that road, we're stuck, as long as it takes to fix it. Years ago, Collard Lake Road was accepted unanimously by this board as a county road, and all we ask is that it continues to serve in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Marilyn here? Okay, welcome. If you could give your name and address, and after you do that, we'll give you 3 minutes. And welcome. Thanks for coming in all the way from Florence. Thank you.
Good morning to you. Yeah, my name is Marilyn Adkins, and I live at 06033 Collard Lake Way. And I've owned my property on Collard Lake Way for 39 years. My neighbors who are speaking to you today represent concerns shared by the residents, all the residents of our area. First, a little background on the history of Collard Lake Road. For instance, on April 12, 1997, the Collard Lake Road Neighborhood Association, in a letter of that date, made a request to the Lane County Board of Commissioners as follows. That's back in 1997 now. The issue is the status of Collard Lake Road and its branches. They went on to attach a copy of the minutes of the February 18th, 1976 board meeting, during which the board voted unanimously and without any conditions, quote, and this is quoted, to accept Collard Lake Road into the county road system. Hayward seconded, comma, it was so ordered and all the commissioners voted aye, unquote. This earlier group did not ask the board to add another road into the current county road system, but they wanted recognition of the correct and legal status of the road, which has county road status as far as we're concerned. Under the county road status, regular maintenance occurs that prevents more costly emergency situations from developing. Now, you probably have heard about the big hole that developed when a leaning tree that we knew was leaning, but it was over a 200-foot drop, and it went and it tore out a big hole, which affects me because when it goes the rest of the way, I can't get out. I can't get out. I have no way. We have read the current staff paper and for the Lars item on the afternoon agenda, and want you to know that we believe the agenda cover memo relating to local access roads does not apply in most respects to the roads that have county road status. We believe our road should not be grouped with the many access roads in the county, which in most instances only serve a limited number of residents. Collard Lake Road provides our only egress and serves over 141 lots. Now, that's, in other words, some of those will be built upon in the future, probably. Again, our basis for this firmly held position is that the board unanimously and without conditions accepted this road as a legal county road in 1976, and it remains a county road today, as far as we're concerned. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay, so next is there a Mr. or Mrs. Craig? No? Sue Craig, very good. This is what I get for reading this incorrectly. So welcome to Sue Craig. If you could just tell us where you live, then we will start our timer at 3 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Sue Craig, 27233 Huey Lane, Eugene, Oregon. And I would like to ask you to, as soon as possible, try to get us out of the AOCC. This is my money you're spending, and I would much prefer you spend it in other ways than anti-public lands litigation and pro-logging litigation. If anything, we need to be increasing and caring for our public lands, not decreasing them. And if it's possible, I would like you to take that money, and I know it goes in different places and so on, but I would much prefer that you use it for our public schools, which need lots of help. I'm out in Veneta, which is a different area for you, but we have 2 third grades in Veneta Elementary School that have well over 30 students in each classroom. And as you know, third grade is a really important time for our third graders. And we need to give them every chance in the world to learn to read, whereas in third grade, they're trying to read to learn. So we've got to make sure they're at a good level to do that. So thank you, and thank you for taking time to listen to public comment.
Thank you. Okay, Fred Mallory, please come forward. Please give your name and address, and after you've done that, we'll give you 3 minutes to address the board. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. My name is Fred Mallory. I'm at 1930 Graham Drive in Eugene, in Commissioner Sorensen's district. Climate change. What are we going to do? Big question for me. I spoke yesterday with EWEB staff, Sonia Carlson, board member, and Craig Geller, supervisor of the Energy Management Services department, where I retired from. And I learned that they do have programs for energy efficiency still operating, you know, rather a bit smaller than what it was in the 80s and 90s when I was there. With a very, but they are doing it very smartly, all the IT computer tech nowadays available. I spoke before here some weeks ago about the idea that I have for furthering energy efficiency, and I think that's a great opportunity. It's a low-hanging fruit, we call it, in for small business energy management. It seems like there's a lot of potential there for energy savings and, you know, helping heal the globe in that department, in that area. But very few outside of EWEB have heard of this idea, or and it seems like I'm in the minority in that case. And I know that this idea has you know, many reasons to go forth with it. Whether it has job creation benefits for the retrofits, a great amount of energy to be captured, and support for these businesses in lowering their costs to do business. Plus, continuing the conservation ethic was started in the 80s. The potential gain is far greater than the initial costs. So we must move into the 21st centuries. Unregulated growth and increase in energy / resources cannot continue to grow in the way it has been done. But where do we go from here? What actions do we make? I suggest a committee be formed to look at this. Let's study the options. Let's put forth the most efficient, that is, the most that will gain us the greatest amount of carbon, either reduced or sequestered, for the amount of dollars and energy put into it. It's talking from my energy efficiency career. And so I would like to see the board come up with some specific actions about climate healing, and maybe a committee or something that would study that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And next we have Colleen Albrecht. You can give us your name and where you live, and then we'll start the timer at 3 minutes, and I think it shows you how much time you have remaining once we get the timer going.
Thank you. My name is Colleen Albrecht. I live here in Eugene. I was going to just make a note about campaign finance reform. I want to say we need campaign finance reform to best represent the majority of our citizens. Our leaders need to represent us and not industries and corporations' interests over our best interests. That includes the wildlands that they mentioned. People have overwhelmingly lost confidence in our government because we want to be electing representatives that represent us. And I wish to thank all the representatives who refrain from accepting unfair donations, campaign donations, and contributions for favors in the future. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Driscoll.
Hello, my name is Pam Driscoll, and I live in Dexter, which is Heather Buck's East Lane County. I'm back for part 2. Once again, I'm taking off work to come here to speak for 3 minutes. I propose once a month you meet in the early evening during the week with public comment as the first agenda item, when a greater number of citizens of Lane County may attend and speak on issues that concern them. So I'm here for that of 3 reasons. The second reason is about the AOCC. There is no valid reason for the citizens of Lane County to pay dues. Last year, I heard it's $107,000 that we paid of our tax money for a lobbying group to basically sue the state to log our public forests, which the vast majority of Oregonians have said they want to preserve. The AOCC is a private organization composed of publicly elected officials whose meetings are not governed by Oregon open meeting laws, yet they pay dues and our tax dollars, and our publicly elected and paid commissioners use time working for the AOCC agenda, which is, like I said, a lobbying group for the logging industry. At a Eugene Climate Town Hall meeting a couple of weeks ago, ideas to mitigate and prepare for climate change were rated, and the top-rated idea that the 200-plus attendees agreed on was to have Lane County implement a climate change action plan. This is a task for the Lane County Board of Commissioners to organize and enact. The latest and best climate science says that our planet has only 11 years or less to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. In order to be effective, we must have an all-hands-on-deck approach, including individuals, communities, and all levels of government. The plan here in Lane County should include protecting and restoring our public forests for all the important ecosystem services they provide. Our forests in Western Oregon are one of the top forests in the world for the carbon that they sequester and store. We should pursue legislation on getting paid for the carbon our forests sequester. Standing forests are Oregon's climate security. In Oregon, private timber companies receive over $300 million in tax breaks annually. 58% of private forest lands in Oregon are exempt from property tax. The harvest tax does not go to the general fund, but to pro-timber interests. This must stop. We should be charging the logging industry for the destruction they are doing, not giving them tax breaks. Perhaps we could give them tax breaks if they prolong the harvest rotation from 30 to 40 years to 80 years. This would increase carbon sequestration on private lands greatly. There are 375,000 acres of O&C lands in Lane County. It is our job to protect them. Forests are much more resilient to wildfires than tree plantations. I'll have to take another day off work to list the many ecosystem services they provide. Our forests are climate sanctuaries that we need to protect and restore. First step, drop out of the Association of O&C Counties before the budget is finalized. Do it for your children, your grandchildren, all living beings and future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is Mike Brinkley. Welcome, Mike. And please give your name, where you live, and you'll get 3 minutes of public comment.
Thank you. My name is Mike Brinkley. I live at 2582 West 28th Avenue in Eugene. I am here to represent the Many Rivers Group of the Sierra Club. We represent over 3,000 members in Coosa, Douglas, and Lane counties. And as political chair, I want to talk about the membership that Lane County has in the AOCC. The AOCC claims to represent 16 county governments in Western Oregon that historically received money from logging publicly owned forest on the lands. But in recent years, they've become increasingly aligned with the timber industry, as demonstrated by their various lobbying and litigation efforts to open up protected public lands. They're pursuing strategy in all three levels of government to log the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument and ramp it up on over 2 million acres of public forest land. In February 2017, they filed a lawsuit against the federal government to overturn protections for the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, and the lawsuit seeks to log federally protected forests and undo President Obama's chief conservation achievement in Oregon. The AOCC has testified and lobbied in favor of various logging bills that would dramatically alter forest management in the Pacific Northwest. This includes the Resilient Federal Forest Act, which passed the House in November 2017. If the version of the bill that had become law, this would have shrunk the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument and required that these public forests and other public lands be managed for the sole purpose of timber harvest. It would have mandated that the O&C lands produce a bare minimum of 500 million board feet of logging a year, which is triple the current logging levels in these forests. This goal cannot be met without logging old-growth forests on the O&C land. And it would have exempted logging projects of up to 45 square miles in size from environmental analysis. This is what the AOCC wants to do now, and it is, in my opinion, not consistent with what we believe and cherish here in Lane County. The Democratic Party of Lane County has resolved in Resolution 2019 to support withdrawal of Lane County from the Association of O&C Counties. And one further point I want to make is that an argument for the AOCC and increasing logging is to support our public schools. And that's traditionally a very poor way of supporting public schools by...
Thanks very much for your public comment.
Okay, thank you.
So next up, we have David Pitoni. Welcome, Mr. Pitoni. Please give your name and where you live, and you'll have 3 minutes of public comment.
Hello, thank you very much. My name is David Ivan Pitoni. I live on 658 Van Buren. I consider myself a very rational person when examining situations. I believe in looking at things logically, but there are some things which cannot be very clearly seen with logic. One of them is karma. Karma, which translated means action, is the repercussions that a person or an animal gets for deeds that they've done. It seems to me like a lot of people that are getting grabbing the reins of the economy and of environmental law and all these things don't believe in paying for what they do. I don't think that death is going to liberate anybody from their consequences. I don't know how you imagine your afterlife or if there is one, but what I can tell you is when you die, you are not going to be freed from your bad consequences. The damage to the forest is a damage to everybody. Damage to the forest is death of all of us. Protection of the forest is life. These are the dialectics. So I think that's enough for you guys to chew on. So I hope you help us and yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up is Eric Jackson, followed by Doug Hyken, followed by Jay Fraser. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Jackson. Please give your name and where you live.
Sorensen, thank you.
3 minutes.
Eric Jackson, downtown Eugene. How you guys doing today? I had a rough weekend. I got arrested again outside of Whole Foods protesting their no longer free bathrooms and the shed's veto of the property next door for the shelter. And it seemed like it was appropriate time to protest the shed and be outside the, what Eugene proper calls the unconstitution zone, where the U.S. Constitution just doesn't count. It's the downtown activities zone. They should just rename it to the Constitution-free zone. It's very puzzling. I would hope that you guys would look into that as well, because it affects you as Lane County. It affects me and all of my friends as the homeless of Lane County and Eugene. And it's disruptive to our thinking, to think that there's a place in Eugene where the Constitution of the United States just doesn't matter because they say it's a zone, and that zone is for activities that don't include homeless. It seems very against the Ninth Circuit Court decision. Seems very against the United States, you know, America, we are, as is said, the place that you can be free, but not here in Lane County, it seems, or in Eugene. Springfield has made it worse. Eugene's catching up quickly. To arrest me for interfering with public transportation because we were on the sidewalk where a bus stop is, not obstructing the bus stop. And for theft because somebody left behind a pair of headphones from the library, and likely if they left them behind under one of my tarps, they figured I would come across it and return it to the library. And the Eugene police officers are smart enough to know that about the community of people that I interact with. But they had to write it down anyway so that we could spend 24 hours in jail and they could dispose of every piece of property that was wet. Saturday morning, after it rained and snowed for a week. It was wet, it was trash. That's not what Levon versus LA says is holding property for 90 days. You guys are in a position to help me. Mr. Murkowski, help me. There is still property sitting at the county recycles in a locker. Does it smell moldy? Does it smell mildewy? Yes, but if the door's open for 10 minutes, it doesn't. And we need that property preserved because the people from 99 can't get there. And the stuff that I retrieved on Friday all got thrown away on Saturday, and I would have liked to leave it there for another few days anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. We next hear from Doug Hyken. If Mr. Hyken is here. I do see Mr. Hyken. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Doug Heiken. I live in West Eugene. Thank you for allowing us to give public testimony today. I'm here representing Oregon Wild, a group that started in Lane County almost, or actually over 40 years ago now. And we're here to urge the Lane County Board of Commissioners to withdraw from the Association of ONC Counties. They're just out of step with the values of Lane County residents. At the root of this issue is BLM lands, and BLM lands are just so important and so valuable to citizens of Lane County. They provide clean water. They provide wildlife habitat that help recover endangered species. They provide carbon storage. They provide recreation opportunities, and they're the quality of life that helps provide the foundation for our economic development strategies. Now, BLM lands are just not any forests. They're some of the most important forests that are out there. They are, if our ecosystems, our forest ecosystems are a tapestry draped across the landscape, BLM lands are the stitches that hold the tapestry together. We have wildlife populations that are endangered in the Cascades and the Coast Range, and they need to have genetic exchange between those areas. And the BLM lands are the connectivity, the linking landscape that help wildlife move between these larger blocks of high quality habitat in the national forests in the Coast Range and the Cascades. Now, these forests are overlogged. There's tremendous evidence that they're overlogged. There's endangered species. There's a severe shortage of old growth habitat. There's hundreds of miles of streams that are listed as water quality limited or are polluted beyond legal limits. There's a climate crisis caused in part by emissions from logging. And we have communities that remain destabilized because they're dependent on resource extraction rather than a diverse economic base that's founded on quality of life. Now, there is a common sense forest strategy that we can use, which is to restore and thin these forests. We can produce jobs, produce wood products, and help the ecosystem if we thin young plantations. But that's not what AOCC wants. They want more logging, but more logging will just perpetuate all the problems I just listed. So we really hope that Lane County will, move away from the policies of the past supported by AOCC and move forward with more progressive and more foundational policies that really support the values of Lane County residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next is Jay Fraser.
Sorry, I didn't sign in very well.
I'm sorry.
I'm Jennifer Frenzer-Knowlton,
Okay.
and I'm in Eugene.
Very good. Well, you'll have 3 minutes now to give your public comment.
Thank you. I'm here today to talk to you all about our county's response to homeless people tolerating the severe weather. So I volunteer at Egan. I don't speak on behalf of Egan at all. This is just my own personal response to what I experienced during the severe weather. And I think that we need more of a backup plan from the county to meet Egan volunteers partway. They spent more than 8,000 volunteer hours trying to shelter people. People died from exposure, unfortunately, last week. We won't know the full stats on that for a bit, but it did occur. And I understand that there are county properties. What I'd love to see is that there is properties identified, tents available, and then when we have an emergency like we did, because there are probably going to be more in the future, that the county can respond, that we don't have to wait to activate Red Cross apparently wasn't going to activate. So we need our own version of that so that we, as a county, can respond and meet the private people and the private efforts part way, instead of depending on them entirely. It's not appropriate use of resources, and it's not a sufficient response. The Egan sites were overcrowded by a long shot. The one that I was in had 70 plus people. It really was designed for 50. So we need more capacity, and I'd like to see how the county could help out and actually have that in place and, drills ready to go. when we get an emergency weather or severe weather experience. Also, I don't know if these are already in place, but policies that we could institute or clauses to rental agreements so that in a weather emergency, everyone is prepared, even the folks who've rented the fairgrounds, that they are ready to allow for Wheeler Pavilion or other spots out at the fairgrounds to be used in case of an emergency. It should already be in the contract. Everyone's notified. Everyone's aware that that's a very central, very key piece of property and area that might need to be used in an emergency. And I understand the Fair Board is in charge of those, but when they're not doing an event out there, that's county property. And so you manage it. So I would like to see that those things are instituted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that has not signed up that wants to give public comment today? Please come forward and give your name and, we have another list here. So please come forward and give your name and you did sign up. Welcome. Oh, yeah. So this is, please give your name and where you live, and then we'll start the timer and give you 3 minutes.
My name is Maura Dewey, and I live in Cottage Grove. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to ask you to rethink your decision to shelve the discussion of membership in AOCC, which you've put off until June 2019. By that time, the Budget Committee will have allocated next year's dues for AOCC, thereby giving us another year's financial outlay of taxpayer dollars to a private sector lobbying group. I believe county membership in this group is unwarranted, unethical, and possibly illegal, which I am going to start looking into right now. AOCC paid $80,000 in 2017 and the same amount in 2018 to Jameson and Sullivan, a lobbying group which took AOCC concerns to legislators. AOCC's concerns are industry-specific, supporting the corporate logging industry by encouraging policy which cuts protections for clean water, healthy ecosystems, and reduces lands set aside for wilderness areas. This is to the detriment of the tourism travel sector in Oregon. I ask why Lane County chooses to support this particular industry, timber, over other sectors. Perhaps Lane County could request membership in ORLA, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, which encourages tourism in our beautiful state. As a matter of fact, the hospitality industry in Oregon provides 11 to 12% of jobs for Oregonians, whereas timber/forestry now provides a mere 2 to 3%, not the 15% of years gone by. In addition, the timber industry's favored tax status adds almost nothing to Oregon's coffers, whereas ORLA members pay their share. I suggest we send a commissioner to ORLA, perhaps Commissioner Bozovich, who currently represents Lane County at AOCC. He could join board members from Blue Star Donuts, Cisco, Adobe Resort, and Godfather's Pizza to make sure our interests are represented in the legislature. Or perhaps we could send a commissioner to a group such as Oregon Wild or Cascadia Wildlands to provide support to the conservation movement and recreation industry. I don't think those organizations would be charging the county $107,000 to belong. It's perplexing that we continue to support an industry that provides little employment and negligible taxes. I think the only thing they do provide is hefty campaign donations to candidates who agree to represent their interests.
Thank you very much for your public comment.
Which you'll be aware of if you've been reading the Oregonian. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Is there anyone who has not signed up for public comment that wishes to give public comment to the board at this time? Okay, seeing none, we will move on and close that part of the agenda. Commissioners, we have a 10 o'clock time certain. Could we do the employee introduction over the next few minutes and defer that? Do any commissioners have any burning comments? Okay.
Will we have an opportunity
Yeah,
to comment?
we will, but we'll have to do it after our employee introduction. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 5, which is our employee introduction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to invite Patience Willingham up here. Lance and Dan, do you want to come up as well? And Patience is our new emergency manager. We want to take, as we do with...
Talk about, baptism by fire.
That's right. I had a whole, list of things we were going to introduce about Patience and tell you that she spent 13 years with the city of Eugene, emergency management, and she's a native of Mackenzie River. All these things seem like old news now because we've gone through this major storm event over the past couple weeks. But I do want to share with you. So Patience is a Mackenzie River native. She's been, she worked in emergency management for the city of Eugene for 13 years before joining Lane County. We pursued a competitive national search to identify a new emergency manager after we transitioned this function from the sheriff's office into central administration. It's housed in Public Works and reports directly to the Assistant Public Works Director, but has a also a reporting relationship to the administrator and is now the Lane County Office of Emergency Management. I want to just share with you, so talk about trial by fire. Patience started, actually her first full week on the job was last Monday, right? February 25th. So she started the week before, did employee orientation and figured out where the bathrooms were and got her pen situated on the desk. And then the big snowstorm hit on February 25th. And she immediately took on the role as emergency operations deputy director within our EOC for that event. She averaged 14 hours a day throughout that effort and did just an exceptional job. I mean, really everywhere I've gone within the organization, the community, people comment, Patience has just done phenomenal work in the last week. Widely praised for her coordination efforts. She also had the wisdom to recognize that Lane County needed the assistance of state partners and other regional partners. This was a major event. I was in Washington, D.C. along with Commissioner Sorensen last week, and we were flying back from Portland to Eugene. It's green everywhere, and then literally you hit Lane County, and it is a blanket of white. So we got hit unusually hard compared to the rest of the state. Of course, the board declared a state of emergency, requested that of the state. So Patience did just an exceptional job working with her existing relationships, and I want to just call out some of these partners that we had. Oregon Emergency Management, Marion County Search and Rescue, Lincoln County, that even provided emergency food rations to Oak Ridge, Lynn County Search and Rescue, City of Albany, Washington County, City of Portland, Team Rubicon, Red Cross, Peace Health, City of Eugene, City of Florence, Florence Police Department, Oregon Health Authority, Clackamas County, community organizations active in disaster. So just an example of some of the critical organizations that Patience was really outstanding in bringing on board here. So we're excited to have her in this role, and we're going to be talking more as we go through our budget process about continuing to make investments in raising the profile of our emergency management function in the organization, pursuing additional trainings. We talked this morning at Agenda Team about creating opportunities for the commissioners to participate in training and development to be prepared in their role during emergencies. So I could go on and on. I want to ask if Lance and Dan have anything more that they want to add in introduction of Patience.
I'll defer to the board. We're short on time, but we're very pleased to have you, and thank you for your outstanding work through this.
Thanks.
do you want to say anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So Commissioner Buck, we got to interact a little bit, and FAR as well during the event. Thank you very much for taking time to come through the EOC and look at the operations. It's really important that our policy group come and see how it works, see the people, what we're actually focusing our priorities on for any given operational period, and who our partners are in the room. So I was able to work directly with the City of Oak Ridge. There are gaps, but that's where we're going to grow in the future, right? Focusing our efforts on our rural areas is important. I spent a lot of time in Eugene focusing on what our communities could do to help take care of each other, and I built a great program there at Eugene, and I'm looking forward to building a great program at Lane County and supporting our rural communities. Living in a rural community, I feel, helps me be a little bit stronger about what their weaknesses are and how they can empower themselves, set their priorities, and take care of their communities, especially in Oak Ridge, Mackenzie Bridge, Veneta, Cottage Grove, all of those small communities, and how they can be better prepared. As we move forward, we will experience bigger events. There will be bigger weather events. This is 2014, 2016, and now 2019 is a trend in winter weather events. And then wildfire seasons will continue to tax us, and I look forward to the opportunity at Lane County to help everybody grow and focus efforts on supporting our communities.
Thank you so much. And I know that the agenda team just today reviewed our request that we made back in January for a briefing for the commissioners. And in our agenda meeting, Sheriff Trapp said that, you know, it was important for all of the elected officials to be briefed, and Commissioner Bozovich and I both participated in a tabletop exercise, and you've done the trainings as well, right, Commissioner?
When I was at EWEB, yes.
At EWEB. So we know that there are trainings out there. We know that there are, for elected officials, we know that there's tabletop exercises, and we'd like to just keep that moving. And we do have a plan to, is that in April or May?
Late April.
Late April to work with you and have that exercise going. Our tabletop last time was where there was a shooting at the high school in Elmira High School, and in that tabletop exercise, one of the things that happened was the commissioner from that district was not able to get to a phone. The phone lines were down, and so, or the phones were down.
Don't date yourself.
Yeah, so anyway, we'd like to do that again, and we don't have exact time, but I just wanted to point that out, that we're going to be doing that, and your assistance will be needed for that. Yeah.
I just want to thank you for all the work that you did in your very first week on the job. You know, I got a lot of feedback from the smaller communities in my district that got hit really hard, and they really appreciated working with you and all the knowledge that you bring to the position. And I look forward to, you know, talking to you further, but not in the middle of a huge winter event or a huge, you know, crisis event, but be able to work on a proactive basis in the future and how we can, you know, definitely develop the department. You're right. I also believe that, you know, this is going to be our new normal, and we have to be prepared, and we have to be out there preparing the people within our community to be as self-sufficient as possible, because these could be even longer. You just never really know. So thank you for your work, and we'll work more together.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a big political thing. Congratulations. It sounds when you were talking like, when everybody's talking, like the elephant in the room is the events we expect as a result of a changing climate. And I look forward to some comments that are going to be made to these other, you know, from the public comment. But congrats. Look forward to working with you. Away we go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to say congratulations on the great work on that event, and I know it continues, because those events don't kind of when the event ends, there's a lot of accounting that has to be done post-event, and it took, almost 10 years to close up the Northridge earthquake books.
That's correct.
So people don't realize how long that keeps going.
Recovery, yes.
Yeah, recovery is a long part of the event. So I heard nothing but great things about the work you did. I heard nothing but great things about the works our public works folks did during the storm. Sheriff's office, I heard all sorts of great stories from a public works employee that hiked over a mile to check on somebody that was trapped. So it was a great effort by the county. I fortunately and unfortunately in some ways missed the entire thing being in Washington, D.C. for United Front at the time, so which was why I wasn't attending that meeting a couple weeks ago. I was on the phone from the halls of Congress, literally. But my wife got caught in Denver trying to get home from Houston and ended up having to fly into Portland and drive a rental car down and all that stuff. So the next day, 24 hours later, pet sitters that were overdue and not supposed to stay an extra day, that whole mess that goes on. Fortunately, I've got really nice neighbors. And that's probably the biggest part of this story was the stories I heard about neighbors taking care of neighbors.
Mm-hmm. It's huge.
Was huge. And getting the community to understand that need for reaching out to your neighbors and taking care of your neighbors for those that are able to is really important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah. We'll compare stories afterwards, personal stories and impacts.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to meet you more formally here, and what a great name to be an emergency manager, Patience.
Thank you.
And we're just really looking forward to this. One final thing, we talked a little bit about, or Mr. Burney mentioned the impact of climate change on the emergency management function of Lane County government. And I've been, I don't know, harping might be a bit strong as a verb, but I've been noticing that with our hotter summers, we're getting into the 3-month period of 100-degree weather, and at least in other cities where there's, and this is maybe more of an urban effect, but I think that because of our forest fires and because of the high temperatures, that we're seeing more and more emergencies, really, a heat emergency. So I don't think, even though we've just been through a snow emergency, and a couple of years ago in southwest Eugene and out Lorraine Highway, we had a really serious ice emergency. I do think that the severe weather, whether it's hot or cold, is going to be a bigger and bigger thing.
Providing services to our vulnerable populations, especially in wildfire season in those cleaner air facilities. We call them cleaner air because it's not really clean air, but it's cleaner than standing outside. And helping our rural schools become more equipped so that they can be cleaner air facilities. So working directly with public health to figure out how we can make those facilities for the vulnerable populations in wildfire situations is huge, but that's just one piece of the pie.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
And Commissioner Farr, go ahead.
I'll be very brief. We have a 10 o'clock time zone, but Patience, I had a chance to observe you personally in the Emergency Operations Center, working not only with Lane County employees, but with a broad range of employees from other jurisdictions, and you were amazing. I mean, you were directing like an orchestra leader. It really was a phenomenon. And a part of the time I spent there, you were on a conference call with Oak Ridge, hearing directly from the people who were being immediately affected through being isolated and cut off almost completely. And I very poignantly and realistically thought about this more or less being a dress rehearsal for what may be a major event in the Cascadia subduction earthquake, where not just Oak Ridge is isolated. You had a chance on a smaller scale to do something that we hope and pray that it doesn't happen, but all experts say that at some point it will, a broad spread emergency where more than just a single community is cut off. And we even had a train stranded, which was awful for the people on the train, but once again, in a larger event, this could be across the entire county and not just in isolated rural and remote places. So Patience, amazing. I had a chance to talk to you outside the room ever so briefly. I didn't want to take your time, but at this point in time, I'll say, well done, bravo.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I know Mr. Kyler's being very patient here for a 10 o'clock time certain, but I failed to mention this, and patience I know will not mention it, but some of the personal stories reminded me that it's my understanding that, when we talk about neighbors helping neighbors and putting others before themselves, Patience had significant damage to her home and set that aside and was here every day, 14 hours on average for that because she was committed and understood that the bigger picture is really helping the larger community. So when we talk about our core values of a passion to serve, drive to connect, and a focus on solutions, you've raised the bar here for the first week on the job of hitting all of those, but we're really excited about what that bears for our organization, our community going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll go back to our adjustments to the agenda and kind of give people an update on what the roadmap is today. I'd like to get Mr. Kyler up here. Then we'll get our consent calendar. We have no emergency business. Then we'll go back to Commissioner's response to public comments and demonstrants, unless people want to.
No, I was listening and trying to figure out when we could, with some courteousness for people that are waiting here, so they can get back to their real lives.
Okay, so do the commissioners want to do the remonstrance now while the public's here?
I do know Mr. Kyler needs to head out as soon as possible, so we've got conflicting issues.
We can hang time. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so I think what the county administrator wants us to do is to have at least one round of commissioners' response to public comments and issues. So with that, let's just start down the table. Commissioner Bozovich.
Sure. I first want to thank the folks from Collard Lake Road area for coming all the way over the hill from Florence. I forwarded information to staff last week that included a copy of the 1976 board order, and the Public Works staff is looking into that along with our legal staff. And I'm hoping that this afternoon will provide more direction as the board to review that and see if the designation of Collard Lake Road has been properly designated. I believe that the information you guys have provided clearly shows it was accepted as a county roadway, and that may be what needs to be recognized, and we'll move forward with that. But I did forward all the information that you all have, and it was supplied to me last week to Public Works and legal staff. So I know they are looking into that right now, and I'm sure hopefully what happens is you're not part of the discussion about whether or not we should maintain local access roads, that you guys will be redesignated as an official county road, and there won't be a question about the maintenance for at least Collard Lake Road. So, and I just want to thank Marilyn for coming over also, because Marilyn's a former planning director for the city of Florence. Is that correct? Yep. So she comes with a little bit of knowledge about, municipal and public record keeping and all that stuff. And I'm glad that she was able to dig all this information up, or help dig it up. I just want to briefly state that the Association of Oregon Counties, I was in D.C. last week, and one of the people I met with was Senator Wyden's staffer, advisor for energy and natural resources. And I was there with folks from Springfield School District and other places that are interested in secure rural schools and other issues about forest funding. And the staffer brought up, without my prompting, Kevin Davis, who's the attorney for AOCC, as being one of the primary people providing help and assistance in drafting the legislation that would replace the secure rural schools funding in a permanent fashion. So if folks believe that there isn't any involvement with that association in drafting legislation, that's the status right now, is they're working very closely with Senator Wyden's office on that. And it's, I know I could get into a whole bunch of stuff, but I will say the Oregon and California lands are not BLM lands. They are public lands, but they were designated specifically for the benefit of 18 Oregon counties. There is no other organization that represents that interest. Not the Restaurant Association, nobody else. So, you know, that's what that association is about. There is no anti-public lands. There's a discrepancy about whether or not an executive order can take one set of public lands and redesignate it as another style of public lands. That's not anti-public land. That's just trying to resolve a constitutional conflict. And in order to do that, you have to go to court to get that resolved. So, you know, that's my brief thing on that. I will also mention for Jennifer that came in to testify about Egan. Egan is not a private organization. It's a public-private partnership. And a lot of the funding for Egan actually comes out of our Human Services Commission, which the Lane County provides over $1.1 million in general funds to that. And part of that 1.1 million funds some of the Egan operational funding. So we are committed to that emergency shelter, and hopefully we can keep it viable, and we'll work towards additional strategies as we have been concentrating on winter strategies for the last several years and have expanded those significantly over the last several years.
Commissioner Burney.
I hate going in order, but I have to. First off, just a little reality check. Since we began this meeting at 9 o'clock, the world, people in the world have emitted over 11 billion pounds of carbon into the atmosphere. Just point of fact. I'm going to get down to what we're doing, but I just want to start up there. Next point, I think ultimately, and I believe I will live to see this, that the kinds of environmental safeguards for forestry we will really see when companies can make more money by leaving trees standing than by cutting them and having them flat. And I think we need to understand that this is this intermix, right, of what many, including myself, see as a climate crisis, which also can be used as an opportunity for robust economic development. And I'm living proof. I did it. That was my business. But I just wanted to share that. Now, Jay, you're not allowed to whisper while I talk because I hear you. That's okay. I'm 100. I wish some of the people were still. A few things. Forgive me. First of all, Collar Lake folk, you are exceedingly well represented in Commissioner Bozovic, and I'm looking forward to the discussion too. And thanks, because this is not my area, and it's been amazing for me to learn about that situation. Regarding the woman who spoke on campaign finance reform, let me just state that I won't be, I'm too old, but if I could be, I would love to be the poster boy for campaign finance reform. We will always have the issue of whose interests are served until we have that. And Oregon is one of the absolute worst states in the United States as it relates to that. Just a point. Yesterday, I made a short video for the group that's supporting the clean energy jobs, HB 2020, I think it is. And the reason they asked me to do that was because there was a $40,000 dark money buy for advertising against it in Lane County. This is what I'm told. I don't know. And they asked me to speak about what dark money is. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, dark money is money from very wealthy groups that have a self-interest and a vested interest in getting us to think the way they want us to think so they can continue to be that way, and they don't want us to know who they are. I don't like that. That, to me, is not accountability in a democracy. Okay, going on with my diatribe, I would like everyone to know that I have requested before. There is no pivot point right this moment on whether Lane County will continue to be a member of AOCC. For some reason, a lot of people have felt that a couple of points. In fact, I can tell you that Commissioner Buck and I are the only commissioners that have never been part of a Lane County Board of Commissioners that has participated and continued to pay those fees. So Speaking for myself, I have a lot to learn, and I've been engaged in that for the last year and a half. There's a lot out there. So what I've requested county staff to do as part of the budget hearings that we are about to have is a list of all organizations that Lane County pays dues to, how much, what the objectives of those organizations are, what the actions and activities of those organizations are, and how they serve Lane County's interests. So that has been requested and will be provided. I want to look at this in a bigger context, as you probably noticed when I pointed out how much carbon has been emitted while we've been talking. And then we can have a realistic discussion about that. And speaking for this commissioner, I do not intend, I don't expect to be bullied to hurry up and make a decision about that, either by interests that are on one side of it or interests that are on the other side of it, but I absolutely will engage both, listen with an open mind, and at the same time, try and make a decision for me that makes sense given my values and priorities. I don't like it when people are incited to, to organize at the wrong time, and I would love it if we could have a movement of people in here that can somewhat be stable and listen to responses after they testify. And I do agree, an evening meeting now and then would probably assist in that regard. I'm through. Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Buck, and then Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair. The other two commissioners have touched on a few things already, but I also wanted to thank you all for taking either a day off of work or driving all the way up here from Florence or other outlining areas. We appreciate you coming out and giving us feedback. It's very important to what we do as a board. So thank you for that. I echo the responsibility we need to take on campaign finance reform. It's absolutely a problem, continues to be an issue. I'm not sure how the county can help with that, but I'm open to discussions on that as well. And we will be, and I was going to bring this up in a little bit later today under our commissioner's business about perhaps doing another either afternoon or evening public comment period, and staff will look at some dates that might be able to help us do that so we can continue testing the waters for additional public comment periods so people are welcome on either their lunch hour or maybe an evening after work. Because I feel strongly, and I think we all feel strongly, that public comment is important and we want to hear you. And the last one I wanted to chat about of the people that spoke was Ms. Frenzer about doing some more response and providing more resources through winter emergency preparedness. I hope that we have a larger discussion about that through the TAC report. And now that we have a new emergency manager on board, I'm sure she's going to be in some serious conversations about that as well. Those resources are strained and limited, but we've got to do better. So I'm committed to having those discussions. I do have, Chair, other remonstrances, but I'll do it for the next round after we've had Mr. Kyler speak.
Okay, so Commissioner Farr, do you have any remonstrance?
Ever so briefly, if Jennifer Frenzer is still in the room. Jennifer, you've been very vocal for a number of years since I first met you. You do attend Poverty and Homelessness Board meetings and the subcommittee meetings, including, I believe, Shelter and Supportive Housing Development Committee. So I've heard you quite frequently, and while Lane County has, over the past 5 years, increased its funding and opportunities during winter emergencies, we had a chance to see this last week how ill-prepared we actually are, how we do have dry, covered buildings not being used while people are perishing outside. And it is it's going to be a topic of discussion, not just in the steering committee for the TAC, but also in the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Jennifer, keep your voice going and keep talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll just take a minute to say I really appreciate everyone coming today, especially people who took time off from work or drove a long distance and who came not to lobby us, not because they were paid to come in and tell us things, but rather because they think it's important public policy. And I do recognize that difference, and thank you so much for coming in. The other thing I'll say is that probably one of the most significant things that Congress has done on the topic of campaign finance reform was done last week when the House of Representatives passed a 6-to-1 low donor matching program. Now, this means when candidates run for Congress, if this legislation passes the Senate and is signed by the President, which are some pretty significant hurdles, but the House of Representatives did pass a bill that would mean that candidates for, I believe, federal office who receive small donor contributions, the federal government would match on a 6-to-1 match. And the states and communities that have adopted that around the United States, I think mostly cities, not necessarily counties, but that have adopted that, have seen a rather significant change in who is elected to public office when big money, which is our current rule, when big money is taken out of the equation. So that to me, and I know it was obscured by a lot of other international and national and state news, including the fact that the snow was ripping my gutters off my house, which didn't make the news. But to me, that was a very significant thing, and I want to thank people that came in on the topic of reform, whether it's taking better care of the homeless or getting us out of the Association of ONC Counties, or whether it is trying to clarify whether a road is a road or a road isn't a road. So thank you, all of you, for coming in. So we're going to have more remonstrance later in the meeting, but right now we need to get Mr. Kyler
thank you.
before the board, and so he will now move to item what is it? Item 7C. So we're moving to item 7C, and this is order 19-03-12-09 in the matter of adopting recommendations of the Lane County Legislative Committee. And I know I wasn't able to go to this Legislative Committee meeting, but I know that Mr. Kyler made a rather significant presentation, and I followed that and his legislative priorities in his report. And I'd like to give you some time to discuss both of the attachments as well as the handout that was done today before you're asked questions by me and other commissioners about the legislative priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Hey, Alex, could you pull up?
Geez, I'm still in Salem, apparently. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commissioners.
You have been in Salem.
Yes, good morning. I did hand out an update for the priorities that have been established over the last year for Lane County, and I thought I would just begin with that. There were 7 bills that we did seek to have introduced. We're trying to get all of them introduced pre-session filed, and we're largely successful with the exception of 2 bills that have come during the regular session. But just to quickly go through the handout, our top priority obviously has been about courthouse funding and seeking state bonding authority. We did have a bill introduced, House Bill 2605. That bill is a piece of legislation that, in all honesty, we'll probably never see the governor's desk, but it's informative as we go through the legislative process to sort of outline what we'd like to see in an end-of-session bonding authority bill. So there's specific language about each bond issuance and the previous bond issuances have been specific to the Multnomah County Courthouse, so 2605 would be more specific to the courthouse projects in Lane and Clackamas County. So the fact that it's been assigned to Joint Ways and Means is good, that there's no hearing scheduled. I just don't want there to be any alarm over that. That's absolutely normal. We're still utilizing the printed version of the bill as we meet with legislators and staffers in the Capitol building. Our Tier 2 priorities have done somewhat better or worse. The House Bill 2104, which has been a big priority for the assessor, and as a result of some of the work that Administrator Mokraheisky has done with the governor's office during the interim, that was really an attempt to reform the way that assessment and taxation is paid for, and support for what's called the CAFA grant, which is the County Assessment Financial Function Assistance Grant Program. It's a mouthful. We refer to it as CAFA. That would help bolster the CAFA account. It is still in the mix, no hearing scheduled yet, but been a lot of discussions about that measure in the Capitol. The next one has to do with a particular priority for the county, which is permanent supportive housing. This was a bill that we tried to get introduced pre-session, and unfortunately it was just a bill that sort of got lost in a representative's office, and she ultimately found it last week. So it's still an LC, which means it has not been introduced yet, and we're trying to work to see if we can get that bill introduced now. Unfortunately, we've passed the first deadline of the legislature, which means that members may no longer introduce unlimited amounts of bills. And so if we are to get this thing introduced, it would have to be as a priority bill for a member. The next bill is Senate Bill 368. This was a bill that I think you had a number of folks come in and speak to you at public comment about after it was introduced and heard. We think that bill is actually dead, but it did have an early hearing. The next bill is House Bill 2320. This is a bill we've been working on for a number of years, and it has to do with how video lottery dollars are allocated to counties. This bill has gained a hearing next week, and so we're hopeful that this is a measure that can move through the process. It will be heard in the House Committee on Economic Development, which is chaired by John Lively, Representative John Lively, and the chief sponsor of the bill is Representative Lively. This is the second time he's taken this issue up for us, so we're pretty hopeful that we get this thing across the finish line this session. The next bill is House Bill 3332. We've gotten this bill introduced. It was, again, one that we were unsuccessful in getting introduced pre-session. Newly elected Representative Marty Wilde is the chief sponsor on this bill, and I'm really hopeful that we can get this bill to have a hearing. It would evolve state policy on naloxone, which is a medication that's used to interrupt almost immediately an opioid overdose, and there's been sort of an evolution of state policy to expand access and ease of use of naloxone, and this measure, which came out of our Health and Human Services Department, would really do a couple things that would increase access to naloxone. Naloxone was largely credited for the spate of overdoses that we had in October in mostly in Springfield. Of the reason why there were no deaths involved with any of those events. I think there were 23 overdoses. And then finally, Senate Bill 449 we did a lot of work on this over the interim to try to address the allowance of farm-to-table restaurants on exclusive farm use land. And unfortunately, our draft, we did get the bill introduced, but there were a number of opponents who came out early on and really put their thumb on it. We had some language in there that said that that a farm-to-table restaurant would utilize ingredients for their meals from the immediate vicinity of the farm, and that just wasn't specific enough for people like the Farm Bureau. They're really pretty nervous about this issue, and so we're just not going to be able to see that one advance. I'm hoping that we can continue to work on that over the next year. And then our Tier 3 priority, House Bill 2321, this is a bill that would allow for expanded anonymity for county juvenile justice employees. It would put county juvenile justice employees on par with Oregon Youth Authority employees when it comes to privacy issues, and I'm happy to report that bill was heard in public hearing. We drafted an amendment for the bill, and it's scheduled for work tomorrow. So hoping that that one gets to the floor of the House as a result of the work session. So that's an update really on those priorities that were established over the last year by the Legislative Committee. Moving to the meeting that we had on February 8th.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Well, let's do this. I'm just, Alex, I know we've had these meetings about the legislative recommendations, and they really get into a big thing. I guess I would like, and I plan on asking a lot of questions myself. So why don't we just have you finish your presentation, and then we will go as long as the commissioners want to go as far as asking you questions and taking votes.
Sure.
Yep. No problem.
So moving to the actual meeting on the 8th of February, there were a couple things that we did. First, in your packet, you do have an updated Lane County, or a draft updated Lane County Legislative Principles and Priorities document. So it's really this document that we started development of this document probably 3-4 years ago now, I guess, because in the past, in a presentation like this, I might bring, you know, sometimes we had like 40 bills in a spreadsheet, and it was really cumbersome. And so we started to work on this, which provided me with some greater authority, but with sidebars that were established by these principles. Because often in Salem, there are bills that just come up that we hadn't expected, and so this document has allowed me to take a position on those in a more immediate fashion than waiting for the board to act. And it's very often the case where I will be asked by other lobbyists in the building to go to a specific member's office as part of a meeting, or to get my own meeting to talk about some of these different kinds of measures that get introduced. And so the Principles and Priorities document just became a really useful tool to give me some guidance while I'm in Salem. One of the things that came up that we addressed during the meeting on the 8th was a situation where we've tried to address on page 1 of that document sort of the procedure for utilizing the board chair's letterhead. So a position statement on behalf of Lane County will typically come from the board chair's letterhead, and then he or she would sign that on behalf of the entire board. More typically in Salem, if I'm testifying on something, I'll put it on my own letterhead, unless I have a staff person come up, and then I might put it on department letterhead. But we had a couple situations early session where individual members came up, and just getting their letterhead and their signatures became kind of an issue that we decided we needed to address in legislative committee. And so what we've tried to do is to, in addition to the language that we had previously where the board, where the county administrator had authority to utilize the board chair's letterhead and signature, then we've now expanded that for individual members. So we had a couple of members come up early session to testify on certain bills, and I think this will streamline the process in the future, this new language. And I think that was the only change that we made to the document, other than, of course, changing the date of the update. And this is a document that will continue. It's very dynamic. I think every time I've come as a legislative committee report back here in the last year or so, we've always had some sort of new update to this document. So it is something that legislative committee continually has on the agenda for review. We then moved into a suite of bills that I'd identified as needing some input from legislative committee, and those are on attachment A. This was a bit of a catch-all in a way to identify bills, particularly on February 8th. The session was only beginning its third week. At that point in time, we'd seen at that point, probably the introduction of maybe just over 1,000 bills. Many of them, of course, had been pre-session filed, and many of those were on behalf of Governor Brown or her agencies, so they're agency bills. And so there were not very many individual member bills, which is now the case. So when we do legislative committee later this week, we're going to see a lot more bills that have an individual member or a group of members, a large group of members who have sponsored those bills, rather than sort of the more typical pre-session, which is maybe on behalf of one member or is an agency bill. So there's a number of these that really haven't done much since the committee meeting, and I can outline those for you. I guess at this point in time, if there's a specific bill you'd like to ask me about, I'm happy to do that. I will tell you that there were a couple that I did want to bring up to your attention. The first one, for example, House Bill 2382 did have a public hearing yesterday, and I did testify on that measure. This is a bill that has been something that's been an issue for the county for a number of years, and that's the taxation of recreational marijuana. As Commissioner Sorensen, Farr, and Bozovich will recall, the board did pass a local, we sent to the voters a question about taxing recreational marijuana at retail, which is allowable under state law. So in Lane County, there's a 3% tax on recreational marijuana at retail that comes directly to the county. And that was a provision of previous legislation that cities and counties could vote on that. And so cities of Springfield, the city of Springfield, the city of Eugene, Cottage Grove, Veneta, I think we've all passed those 3% ordinances. Lane County's was only allowed to adopt a retail tax for those retailers that are located in unincorporated Lane County. And you can imagine there's probably, I don't know, 60 to 70 retailers in the Eugene-Springfield metropolitan area, and I think we just have like 4 in Lane County. So the tax revenue is really out of balance. I testified about Eugene having $1 million of tax revenue from marijuana retailing locally last year, and Lane County having just over $30,000. So with the authorities that you have as the local public health authority and the local mental health authority, and as well as the nuisance complaints and the land use code issues that we've dealt with, the sort of responsibility and the revenue just doesn't line up. 2382 would work to rectify that by allowing for a tax on producers and growers rather than just on retailers. I think the challenges with this bill is that it has a trigger where only those counties that received a certain amount of Secure Rural Schools dollars are eligible. And so it was designed to sort of help the counties in fiscal distress, which are also the counties of southwestern Oregon, which is also where there's a great deal of marijuana production and growing that's occurring. But that became an issue at the hearing yesterday. So I'm not sure we're going to see this thing move. Where we're trying to get it is it has a subsequent referral to the Revenue Committee. And so what we were really trying to do yesterday was get out of House Economic Development and into House Revenue. A couple reasons for that is, one is that it really is a revenue question and not necessarily about sort of the health of the marijuana industry. And the other reason is that House Revenue, if a bill can get to House Revenue, there's no deadlines that are attached to it. So the legislature has rules that certain committees stay open throughout the entirety of the session. House Revenue is one of those, and so if we can at least get the bill to House Revenue, we've got a chance to work that bill and try to find some sort of balance between city and county taxation, and that was really the attempt there. So that's one that I wanted to bring to your attention. The next one is another one I wanted to bring to your attention, 2257. This is the governor's task force on the opioid epidemics bill. And we had tried to get our naloxone language actually into that measure by attending the governor's task force meetings, and we were unsuccessful in that effort, but the committee did want an amendment to that bill because there was some unfunded work for county jails in the bill as introduced. And that language did come out of the bill, so I'm happy to report that the bill did get amended the way the committee had hoped for. And it's not, this bill is not across the finish line yet, but I have every expectation that it will pass the legislature this session. Another one that I'll bring to your attention is House Bill 2493. It's relating to the aerial application of pesticides. Commissioner Sorensen, this was a bill that you particularly flagged for us. This is one that that still does not have any hearing scheduled, but it is a priority for Representative Holvey, who's the sponsor of the bill, and so we did take a position to continue to watch that measure. Or, sorry, the committee recommended that the board continue to watch that measure. The last, on that first page, the last bill, Senate Bill 7 is probably another one worth mentioning. Senate Bill 7 is a bill that's a priority for Senate President Peter Courtney, and it has to do with lowering the blood alcohol level for determining a DUII in Oregon. And in particular, we had good discussion at the committee about the board's recent adoption of its traffic safety action plan and the sort of renewed focus on roadway safety that we've also reflected in our priorities and principles document. Let's see, we had, probably worth talking about is also Senate Bill 595, which Commissioner Farr actually went up and testified on relating to local transient lodging taxes. This is a bill that would allow for new money in the from transient lodging taxes to go, some of which could go to the to provide affordable housing for workforce, and we've got a pretty powerful sponsor, Senator Betsy Johnson. This is a bill that came out of Tillamook County and Lincoln County commissioners who are both there to testify on it, where workforce housing on the coast is a really big issue, and in parts of Lane County on the coast is also a big issue. It's not clear to me that this bill will make it across the finish line. It was moved, again, sort of like I talked about in the previous measure. Sometimes bills get introduced and assigned to one committee with a referral to another. So this one had a referral to Senate Finance and Revenue, and it did move into that committee. So it's at least got a place to live for the rest of the session. Whether it can advance or not is a big question. Coincidentally, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, not a big fan of this measure, and very powerful group in Salem, and I just don't think they're going to let that one get all the way to the governor's desk. Then finally, in a bill that will be heard actually this afternoon, 2449 is the 911 tax. This was a bill that the sheriff in particular is pretty interested in, and so we're asking the board to take a support position on that measure. So I think that concludes what I needed to say. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions on the agenda that we had for the committee or any other bills that we might not have addressed here, but I'm open for questions.
Okay, let me say, first of all, thank you so much for your hard work. This is a very difficult and moving target of the every 2-year general session of the Oregon Legislative Assembly, and we're lucky to have former Representative Farr and former Senator Sorensen here to ask questions about the process and this year. I wanted you to, since Representative Holvey has introduced House Bill 2493, and he, like the Board of Commissioners, has been grappling with the topics of aerial application of herbicides, and seemingly it's difficult for a city to regulate that because that's been preempted, difficult for a county to regulate because that apparently has been preempted. Citizens come forward with various initiatives. For various reasons, voters, at least in Lane County, haven't voted on it. They've passed it in Lincoln County, but it looks like this is a pretty narrowly tailored piece of legislation, just the two major watersheds in the Willamette Valley, sub-watersheds in the Willamette Valley, where they supply water to Salem and to Eugene. And I'm just, I guess I personally would like to see us support that. I mean, you mentioned it doesn't have a hearing, right? Does not have a hearing?
Does not have a hearing.
Yeah, so, I mean, it is more of a statement of our support that we'd like to see something done on this. This looks like he's trying, to me, I mean, he is trying to respond to public concern about this in a very, in my view, tempered way by just highlighting two watersheds. Why wouldn't we support that?
Commissioner Sorensen and commissioners, we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about the bill, other than, I think, as you pointed out, Representative Holvey, the other interesting thing about both watersheds is that they've also both been impacted by blue-green algae issues. And I've talked to Representative Holvey. He thinks there's a link between those two things. And I've talked to other folks who disagree with that. I think the reason why we took the monitor position is we expected other bills to come. There's a couple reasons. One, that we expect other bills to come, and in fact, I will have other bills for legislative committee around the topic of aerial spray. There's a number now that have been introduced. And so we were sort of wanting to see what the mix of bills would be in the legislature. The other reason was that as you recall, the Public Health Advisory Committee had written to the board last year with some specific recommendations about aerial spray legislation. And their specific recommendations aren't really covered by this bill. So that was part of the reason why we just took a monitor position on it. But obviously, it's at the will of the board.
Okay, what about the Senate Bill 379? That's the one that is an employment legislation, and just to let people know who are trying to follow this from home or otherwise, it is a bill that relates to the unlawful employment practices in the state of Oregon. And it declares an emergency, provides that conditioning employment on refraining from using any substance that is lawful to use in the state is unlawful employment practice. Well, it seems like there's a lot of substances that are lawful to use in this state, and if it's aimed at marijuana, it seems like it should say marijuana. And if it, I mean, it seems like because someone that is using a lawful substance, like maybe my asthma medication, they would be, it seems like that should be something allowed, not prohibited. And if it's kind of aimed at marijuana, if that's, I need you to tell me whether it is, but at least in the title, it seems like it's a discrimination against people that are using medication. I just want to, is it all about marijuana? I keep saying marijuana, but it's not even, doesn't even say marijuana.
No, it doesn't, Commissioner Sorensen and commissioners, but it is about marijuana. This is a bill that's been tried a couple of different sessions now, and there's a couple things to know about it. One is that when the bill was heard, there was nobody who spoke in support of this measure. It was heard in Salem, and I almost wanted to take a film of after the hearing was over, and this group of people got up and left the room, and it was like the who's who of the lobby in Oregon. I mean, it was the most powerful lobby groups exiting the room after testifying in opposition to this. So there's just a huge amount of opposition to this bill, and I think there's just a lot of operational problems still. So a great example.
What would the bill do? Just give it to us straight. What would this bill do?
Make it very difficult.
It will make it very difficult to discipline a person for utilizing marijuana while they're working.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a number of things. One is that there's a whole lot of uncertainty about when impairment really ends after partaking of marijuana. So that was part of the conversation. We did not testify on the bill, but for the counties, I know what we've talked about in committee is that the county certifies that we're a drug-free workplace in terms of any federal dollars that we get. And so you know, having this kind of legislation in place and trying to sort of balance between what the county does and states as it's part of its federal receiving of significant amounts of revenue could be jeopardized by not being able to enforce our drug-free workplace policies. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Farr.
I just wanted to state that last by Mr. Kyler is really probably the most important consideration, that it would more or less bind the hands of the county in terms of being a drug-free workplace. In that marijuana, as Mr. Kyler said, that, and I have heard, I'm not an expert on this, but I have heard that it is impossible nearly to tell where impairment ends. Because it does remain in the bloodstream for an extremely long period of time. So it really is based upon the county's ability to adhere to federal requirements.
Could you, though, answer my question about using any substance that is lawful? I mean, pharmacists prescribe medication all the time. That is a lawful use. I'm just trying to understand the language that's right in front of us.
You know, there's
exactly. That's one of the downsides of this bill, I believe, and I'm sorry, Mr. Kyler, is that it's not specific. I think a more specific bill may be appropriate someplace in a subsequent session that speaks specifically to marijuana. That's another part of the consideration. It's a pretty vague bill.
And Commissioner Sorensen and commissioners, prescriptions are federally approved, whereas marijuana remains a federally illegal class, I want to say class A drug, where it's considered to be an illegal drug. So that's the nexus here, and I think that, I know there are some bills in Congress that are really trying to rectify a number of inconsistencies between federal and state policy, and at least I think it's sort of a decent, you know, terms in Salem is just we continually remind members that, you know, until some of these federal issues get sorted out, it's very difficult for Lane County to take positions in support of some of these marijuana measures.
It sounds like the bill is dead anyway.
Commissioner Sorensen and members, I don't think so. I mean, there were some talk about amendments. The bill did get amended last session to just be available for example, those people who are card-carrying medical marijuana utilizer. So that's how the bill advanced last session, and I was sort of surprised that they went back to the as introduced version from that session instead of the as amended version. But
And the word marijuana is not part of it. It is any substance.
any substance, right? But that's how it was introduced last session as well, and the bill did get amended to just to try to address medical marijuana only. So it may be that there is some work done on that. The chair of the committee, obviously Senator Floyd Brzezinski, I think he's very interested in trying to find a way to thread this needle, and so I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back with an amendment that speaks to just medical marijuana.
Okay, and what about House Bill 2020, the Clean Jobs Bill?
That was not part, Commissioner Sorensen, members, that was not part of our discussion. I do plan on bringing that this week to the Legislative Committee.
And what about House Bill 2007, which Multnomah County and the public health people there, it's a dirty diesel bill.
I'm going to bring that to Legislative Committee as well.
Okay. And then last but not least on my list, what about under your legislative principles when an individual commissioner writes a letter that's been presented by staff, it says copy of the letter will be given to the commissioner. What about to the board? So we'll know that a commissioner has been asked to represent a position of Lane County. That's under your...
Yeah, sure. Commissioner Sorensen and members, we could certainly do that. I think what we were trying to do, I hadn't really contemplated that. What we were trying to do was make sure that there was buy-off from the commissioner on the version that they were asked to sign.
Well, yeah, and I agree, and I don't disagree at all. But what I'm saying is, if we're going to have this modification to have an individual commissioner writing, then it says the county administrator or designee will provide that commissioner with a copy of the signed letter. Well, what about the board?
No, that's a good point. That did not come up during our discussion.
Okay.
We can certainly. We're going to be meeting later this week. We can certainly, like I said, we have this on the agenda again. I think there's probably a number of principles we might want to take a look at, and we can certainly do that. I think, again, what the intent was to make sure that the individual commissioner, before agreeing to have their signature affixed, got a chance to look at what they were signing on to.
Exactly. Okay, so Commissioner Burney, let's move down the line here and have you and...
I would like to state, I might be the minority person here, but hey, I would like to state that this is an awful way to review this for me. If we can't stop on piece of legislation by piece of legislation, if there are any questions or requests for illumination, I've already lost 80% of my questions. So I just want to point out that if we could possibly go through these bit by bit and have remember I asked if we have the opportunity to ask questions, for me at least, that would be really helpful.
And you can do that right now.
I understand, but I have to do that with everything that's already been gone through, and I wanted to do it piece by piece, so I wanted to make that statement. If we could possibly reconsider that for a future presentation. Second, and now pardon me?
Sorry, it's the chair's prerogative.
Oh, it's the chair, okay. I was told it's the chair's prerogative, so I'm weighing in. Okay, now to the best, a second statement, forgive me, but this got my eyes rolling, and I really try and pay attention. So I'm going to do my best here. On the sheet that we were passed, was distributed to us, when you talked about Representative Lively's economic development piece, whatever that number was, how would that financially impact Lane County?
Yes, so you're talking about House Bill 2320. That's a video lottery allocation bill. We think that it's sort of a complicated piece of legislation, Commissioner Bernie, but the legislature for about the last 5 biennium have used this tool that's completely available to them, where they basically, at the end of session, write a piece of legislation that says, notwithstanding the statute that governs the 2.5% video lottery distribution to counties, they, instead of saying 2.5%, they just identify a fixed amount of money. Okay, so over that 5 biennia, for the most part, that means counties have lost money. There was one biennia where it actually resulted in more money to the counties. And so what we're trying to do is this true up. We think that for Lane County's impact, it would probably be about $150,000 a year.
So that would be
that we've lost as a result of the legislature's utilization of that tool. So we call it a true up in that we want to recognize that it's a functional tool for the legislature to use that, but that there needs to eventually be a truing to get back to what the statute actually says. And so we think it would be about 150.
I appreciate all the detail, but the net would be the guess, about
$150K
$150,000 a year for economic development for Lincoln County. Thank you. And then I wanted to piggyback on what Chair Sorensen said regarding the, I'm looking at these and I see some we're monitoring, some we're supporting, and some we're objecting. Forgive my naivete. What does monitor mean? Does that just mean we're interested in the outcome?
Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Bernie, it means that we're going to continue to watch it so that as it evolves, we've got it on our radar screen and, we can respond.
So there's a lot that we're not looking at.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot we're not looking at.
Okay. And as it relates to that, if I heard you correctly, and if I didn't, please let me know, that you said the reason that the county did not take a support position on the aerial spraying related specifically to the 2 areas was because other bills were being introduced and you wanted to see where they fell. Where do they fall? Because you said they're introduced now.
Well, I don't have them. There's a couple I've seen. I'm going to bring them to legislative committee. I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I'm not recalling exactly what they do.
I don't know most of the time, too. I'm just wondering.
They get more at the applicator themselves and sort of putting different barriers. I think there's one that requires the State Board of Forestry to not spray. So there's just sort of different approaches.
So, thank you. I don't know how this works. So will all of these get molded into one, or for a statement of, or if I may, for a statement of intent of this body, would it, even if something's imperfect, would it be appropriate to weigh in and support? I mean, if that was the vote.
Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Bernie, I mean, you could certainly ask for something to be put into the legislative principles document, and then that way we would just have it, right? So it would be memorialized within that document. There are opportunities. I mean, certainly the priorities, which were pre-session filed, I mean, those were like, Kyler, go get those things written, right? Go find a way to get that bill introduced. That's pretty aggressive. In terms of the next here is if a bill actually gets scheduled for a public hearing, there's that opportunity to weigh in. I do some advocacy, but mostly advocacy on our own priorities to ask for a bill to be introduced.
Got it. I'm almost done, you guys. I apologize.
No, keep going. This is very complicated.
Yeah, no, it's clear as mud, but it covers the ground. Forgive me, that's a Harry Belafonte quote. Did you not say that you'll do whatever the will of the board is? So, I mean, is this an opportunity for us to say we support a piece of legislation?
Yes.
Okay, so is this the right time for me to make that motion?
I was kind of hoping that we would do a round of questions
say no more.
from everybody, and then by hearing that I wanted to take a support position, other commissioners can give their views on things, and if it comes up, then at the end, we can have some motions.
Gotcha, just because that's just a very discrete piece of legislation. It doesn't relate to the whole state. Last question. That's cool, I was just waiting. Last question. You said that AOC backed and I don't have the number, I apologize, that AOC backed legislation, I think it's on your sheet here, but you said it was probably dead, that related somehow, it was for citizen initiatives.
That was the county home.
That was a bill, Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Burney. So Senate Bill 368 was a bill that was actually, we wrote the bill, but just the way pre-session filing went, the Judiciary Committee, which introduced it, wanted it at the request of. We'd brought it through the Association of Oregon Counties because it affects all counties.
Yes.
And so, any rate, that's why it got introduced that way. But yeah, it's.
No, I totally got it. And my question is, who would be against that? I mean, isn't all that allows us for citizens to know up front whether they're structured? Who would be against that?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Burney, it was all the people who came in and testified in public hearing down here about how they wanted. I mean, they don't like the process at all. I mean, they want. What they want is an initiative to be voted on, irrespective of how it's written. And if it becomes an issue once it's voted on, that's what they would like to see, is that then it goes to court for review after the fact, as I understand their opposition. Okay. I mean, frankly, we were blown away by that. I thought we were giving a gift to this process by streamlining it, and the amount of opposition that came out on that was a complete surprise.
Thank you for indulging me.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Thank you. So there are several of these bills, I think, that actually yesterday in Ledge Committee, AOC took positions on, and I've been trying to go back and forth and try and figure out which ones, but it's really hard to go back because you don't get a concise set of minutes out of that committee till a month later. But real quick on the I guess it's Senate Bill 379. I pretty much remember that one going through governance with an opposed
certainly
recommendation out of AOC, and I think part of it was CIS was really up in arms about that, city county insurance, because they felt it was going to generate a huge legal liability mess for the folks they insure, municipalities and counties, in HR. So that's one of the reasons why that is at issue, not just all the various issues about safety, et cetera, that might be involved, but. A lot of the other aerial spray bills were in front of Ledge Committee yesterday. And
this one was too, I believe.
Was it?
Yeah.
And I think almost everyone got an opposed stance from AOC. And what was interesting was Commissioner Hunt from Lincoln County spoke in opposition to a lot of those because of the mess they've had to deal with the Citizens Initiative that passed there, and the money they're spending legally right now around those issues. So it's kind of interesting to see that the one county that's actually had an initiative passed, one of their commissioners was speaking in opposition of some of the state bills to regulate aerial spraying. Not to mention that there's really very little scientific data that shows there's an impact. And if you guys want me to show you the data, I can show you the data. We actually have a bigger concern with what people use in their yards and gets discharged from the storm drains from Thurston just above the EWEB intake than what we have from active forest management. In fact, the cleanest watersheds testing-wise, when they've done sub-watershed testing, have come from actively managed forests that have included areas that have been aerial sprayed. So I would think that's probably, the bill, Rep. Hovey's bill, I don't know if it's moving. And one of the good reasons why to just kind of sit and monitor is we don't make any political enemies up in the State House when we have other things we're trying to move. One of the things when we start talking about taking positions on bills is we also have to be tactical. And I would lobby for and oppose on this, but I don't think it's smart of us. It's not really moving. We don't need to make Representative Hovey angry. Taking a support position is going to make other folks angry. So it's kind of, one of those things where that's one of the reasons why sometimes we'll put a monitor on something. And we have to be tactical about that because there are things we are trying to get done. We are trying to make sure we get the right bill for the bond and we don't get edged out by Clackamas, who's trying really hard to get themselves in front of us in line. They're not going to, but they're trying. And there's a lot of legislators that live in Clackamas County. So, it's something, so it's one of those things where I would just caution us to be tactical when we think about support opposed positions and monitor. So I think the changes to the legislative priorities document about single commissioners is a good change, and I support that. And I appreciate the update on the legislative priorities, and I don't see anything in the actual bill stances that has me concerned about, which way the county's taking a position at this time.
Hey, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Just one question for you, Mr. Kyler, regarding Senate Bill 500, which is relating to property tax deductions for certain veterans. Can you just briefly say where that is?
Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Farr, that one has been amended and is on its way to the floor of the Senate. I do plan on bringing it to Legislative Committee this week.
So it's been amended to make it less onerous, less costly for counties then?
It is less costly than the introduced version, yes.
I'll look forward to hearing more on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Commissioner Buck.
I don't have too many questions. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the process because I'm not on the legislative committee, and learning how we give it to you to work on as things change from hour up in Salem these days. That's good for me to hear, so I know where we sit as a board versus, individually. I also would like to know if, when I've signed a letter for House Bill 88. I'm sure my other commissioners would have liked to see that as well. So I would definitely support, copying everybody if everybody agrees to that. But also if there's a specific, I've also, been emailed specific bills that people individually email me for support. But I would like to be able to know now that I can forward it to the legislative committee for review prior to the board coming up here and making a decision. And so I've just been learning that process this legislative cycle. And a lot of these bills I've never read, so I have to rely on you or other commissioners that may know them a little bit, and I may know other ones. So when we write maybe a collective letter of support for a particular bill, I want to be able to have a little bit of time to research that and make sure I fully understand what we're supporting. I do appreciate, the breakdown of this particular one. And I would like us to be able to be more supportive of our legislators as a county and make sure that they know that they can come to us if there's something that they want to introduce and have us contemplate whether it's something we want to support at that time. And I don't know if they come to you first or how that process would occur either. Just putting questions out there for process.
So Chair Sorensen and Commissioner Buck, you bring up a number of good points. Senate Bill 88 was an easy one because we already had it in the principles document. So again, I sort of felt very comfortable saying, okay, Lane County will support that bill, which, by the way, is getting a work session, so that's good news. And to your comments about, supporting local legislators, absolutely, although not always. 379 is a great example where this has been a priority of Floyd Brzezinski's for many years. He knows Lane County does not like that measure. To Commissioner Bozovich's point, I actually sat down and wrote testimony for that bill and then sat on it I didn't submit it because I was like, I knew that everybody and their brother was going to oppose the bill. I didn't really need to waive something in Senator Przansky's committee because we need all the votes we can get on our big priority. And so to Commissioner Bozovich's point, it's a massive chess game. It's can be a wonderful and terrifying place at the same time because you just never know sort of what's happening. Marijuana is another great example. We've got a bill later this week on social consumption that Representative Fahey is sponsoring. At least staff can't stand that measure. And, the board has principles about social consumption that would say we would not support that kind of thing. So there are things we can support, but there's often times where we don't, and just trying to sort of preserve relationships through both bills we support and oppose is, luckily, people who work in the Capitol building are very used to that sort of environment where people agree to disagree a lot. And as long as you keep it respectful, it seems to work out very well. To your question about sort of process and, that's really the reason why we have the legislative committee is it gives us a good hour and a half to focus in. We put the language right up on the board. We talk about these things. And the idea, in principle, is that you've relied on a committee to give you advice. And that, my job here is to sort of recap what that looked like at the committee, but the committee is a place where that really delving into the individual language occurs. So the good news is that's actually happening. If there's improvements we can make to this process, absolutely. We've been working, I've been working on this for 11, 12 years now of trying how to make it better. It's a really confusing, fast-paced thing. So I appreciate you bearing with us, but opportunities for improvement, always.
I would just add that the legislative committee is composed of 2 commissioners and department directors. And so one of the things that dynamic is that we have some of the true state experts that work for Lane County that are in that legislative committee and give their perspective on bills. On the other hand, you and I are the people that know these legislators and have to work with them. And we don't, when we see that Lane County is taking a position here that maybe staff, say in this case with the Senate Bill 379, where the HR department, they're very much against it, so are all those large employers and all our lobbyists that came in to try to kill the bill. To me, we're back to our Pete's version of our 3 main roles: constituents, helping to run the government, and being leaders. And to me, sometimes I have to disagree with the legislative committee because I see it as a matter of leadership. So that's the way I take 379, for example, or the herbicide bill, the spray bill. So to me, those are 2 where I feel like, and the other one which you commented on, which is and Mr. Kyler said that he thought that would be an improvement, would be on the topic of getting copies of letters that staff writes for individual commissioners on bills. And I think that if we made those changes, okay, just to name them, one, to get copies of the board gets copies of letters that individual commissioners send when those letters have been written by staff. Okay, that's a change. Another change is monitoring Senate Bill 379 as opposed to opposing Senate Bill 379. And then the other one that I would think would be reasonable is to support House Bill 2493, which is the herbicide ban, every aerial application of herbicides in the McKenzie and CNEM. So if we could get the monitor on the on the Senate Bill 379, we could get the support on the aerial herbicide ban, and the change in the legislative policy, committee's policy, so that commissioners get copies of letters that staff has written. If we can make those three, I would be a happy commissioner. Happier even than I am now. I'm very happy, so. But anyway.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah, and see, there's some people are happy to hear that. So that's the way I would then move us from now our question and answer period into our action period. And I'll just let the board have a discussion of whether they want to make motions. And I think Mr. Kyler needs to get some kind of guidance so he can do his job.
I guess I would just ask, can we take that as feedback for the next iteration of the priorities document, or did you want to change that for purposes of this board
Are you asking that we take positions today on these bills?
Yeah, you have a board order that we...
Yeah, you have a board order. That's what I'm saying. And so if that board order encompasses both the positions as well as the legislative committee's changes, I think it does, yeah, A and B. So it encodes both, and so that's what I'm saying. If we could just drop off that attachment and talk about it later, then I would be okay with that. But right now, the way it's presented and in our printed agenda, it's to approve both the positions as well as the principles. So that's what I'm saying. Yep.
I have a question.
Yep.
This board order, I believe, was prepared by the legislative committee.
Yeah.
And remind me who's on that?
All department directors and Commissioner Farr and myself.
Okay, so everybody has a voting right for that?
I'm not sure what the rules are.
Because
Mr. Kyler, can you recite the names of the people on the committee?
I'm thinking somebody voted on this to bring it here, including Farr and you, Chair, but am I wrong?
No.
Commissioner Sorensen was not there.
I was not present, and I believe that the members of the committee, correct me if I'm wrong, are the two commissioners that the board appoints, plus all department directors. So all department directors are part of the legislative committee.
There's no vote.
Including the sheriff and the DA.
There's no
There's
vote
typically no vote.
So department directors are there to provide feedback and certainly weigh in.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, so had you been there, this might look different.
It might, but the point is that what the committee usually does is the committee usually listens to the elected officials that are there and makes a decision about what to report. I knew I couldn't be present, so I took some of these, and I'm sure Mr. Kyler did that and reported some of them as monitor as opposed to oppose or support. But the buck, excuse me, I knew I wasn't going to use that expression. The buck stops here. I'm sorry, I really do. I hate that almost as much as why does Peter have to pay Paul all the time? Anyway, so anyway, we have to make this decision. To answer your question, we have to make this decision.
Thank you. First, I hope if I had even the least tone of angst when I was asking you questions, I want to make it clear, it's just my confusion.
And I'm sorry, I may look uncomfortable. I have an appointment in Salem with the presiding judge, so I'm getting a little nervous about my own personal ability to be here for much longer.
I know, I wouldn't want to work with the people that I work for when I could talk to the presiding judge. I'm sorry. But I wanted to let you know that. And I also, that's it. I just want to make the comment, it's been interesting to live a life where a topic was once called reefer madness when I was going to college, and now it's called social consumption.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more.
So it sounds like there's some, maybe opposition to this particular board order. Is it, does it need to be done today, or can it go back to the legislative committee that you're meeting in a couple of days and bring back with something that is updated at that time?
It's at the pleasure of the board. There's, without official positions from the board, I do occupy a little bit of a sort of jelly-like space sometimes where I'm like, okay, I'm not exactly sure how to respond to legislation that's moving. I think this is pretty typical. I mean, make a couple changes and outline them in the in your motion, and it's not that this isn't different than any other legislative committee board order that I've experienced. Typically, the board does sometimes agrees with everything we've written and sometimes says no.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Are you, okay. Commissioner Buck, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Farr and then Commissioner Bozovich.
Just regarding the board order that we're looking at right now, where a support or oppose may be difficult to change, more difficult to change, Commissioner Buck, a monitor would be more easy to change. So, for instance, if you look at 379, which is a monitor, if we were to pass this board order intact, I'm sorry, 379 is an oppose. If we look at ones that are a monitor, it would be relatively easy as more information comes in to change them. So make it a little bit easier to pass this order intact, knowing that the support level could be changed by a subsequent order.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I don't want to cut off board conversation, but I just want to offer, you can, I think we're comfortable if you do either send it back to legislative committee and we can put it on the consent calendar next Tuesday and approve that. And I think Mr. Kyler understands where the board's sentiment is at for the course of the next week. Or you can make a motion to amend what's in front of you today and approve the changes that you discussed. So either one, but if the majority of the board is more comfortable with one of those than the other, then it's your choice.
Okay, Commissioner Bozovich.
So it is more powerful for Alex to go up to Salem when we have close to a unanimous vote on positions on bills. So seeing that, what I would like to propose is I'd like to move approval of the board order amending the stance on Senate Bill 379 to monitor.
Okay, we've got a motion to change the legislative position from the committee's recommendation to monitor as opposed to oppose on Senate Bill 379. Is there a second?
That's for the entire slate with just that change.
Okay, so it's a motion to approve the entire slate with just that change. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bozovich, second by Commissioner Farr, to approve the legislative recommendations and report with one exception, and that is the position on Senate Bill 379 from opposed to monitor. Further discussion on this motion. Commissioner Bernie.
How do you offer an amendment to the motion?
Move to amend.
Make a motion to amend it.
Right here and now? I move to amend. Yeah, I would.
What is your amendment?
Yeah, I wasn't going to do this, but if we're going to tinker with it, I would move to amend the position on H Bill B 2493 from monitor to support.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bernie, second by Commissioner Buck to amend the motion and to support the House Bill 2493. Okay, further discussion on the amendment. You're supposed to say something nice about your amendment.
Talked about it.
I'm saying say something nice here and forget it over there.
If you want to say something.
I think I'm making the amendment because I asked Alex to understand the context. I wasn't going to originally, but if we're going to tinker with this at all, that to me would at least allow, in a specific situation, a ban on aerial pesticides. And I think it's important to take that stand. Now, I'm going to say this is part of why I need more information. I think it's much more important to not talk about whether something is being applied aerially or not, but to talk about what's in the chemicals that are in the pesticide. But that's not what we have in front of us. And that's why I made the motion, or the amendment, excuse me.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment. Commissioner Buck.
I think, given, it seems like out of all of these, this is the one that maybe we don't all unanimously support or oppose. And I am curious how difficult that is for you to take back. And if this one needs maybe a separate discussion.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Buck, this is a tough one for me. You know, for a number of reasons, we would be sort of a standalone county outside the family of counties on this one, potentially. We might find some support with Multnomah County on this one. I don't know how their vote went yesterday. I don't think the bill's going to move anyway, frankly, so, you know, I'm not sure that I'm all that concerned about it. I think if there were a bill that were definitely on the move, I might respond differently to a situation where there's a split vote from the board.
Mr. Chair, to the motion.
Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And I prefer to leave this at monitor myself for kind of the same reasons that Mr. Keller just outlined. In that it's monitor, it allows us to take more, have a more robust discussion and take a firmer action once the bill does start to move. If it remains static, then the more robust discussion would not necessarily be necessary. However, if it did begin to move, we could talk more about it and actually more outline the reasons for us voting in support of or as opposed to that particular bill or any other bill for that matter. So monitor remains as a more or less a neutral position that Mr. Keller could perhaps handle more easily in his day-to-day work in the legislature.
Okay, does anyone else want to be recognized on this amendment? Yes, Commissioner Rosevich.
Just quickly, if the amendment passes, then I'll have to vote no on the whole slate. If the amendment fails, I will support the whole slate. You know, one of the options could be is to pull this bill from the slate, if that's the one that's going to cause the split between the board. But as I see it, with the moving the Senate Bill 379 to monitor and leaving this as monitor, we could probably end up with a 5-0 vote, which is a lot better for Alex to take to Salem. But that's up to the board. If you want to split the board over one particular bill, that's up to you.
So, any further comment on the amendment? And we'll vote on the amendment, and then we'll vote on the main motion.
Sure. I'm learning the process. I apologize. I certainly apologize for the time this is taking. I'm starting to learn about this whole process. Here's how I feel. If, in fact, what's the number of the aerial? HB 2493, in your opinion, is not moving forward, and so it's sort of a non-issue, if I heard that correctly. And yet that does impede our ability to provide the level of support you need with this other stuff. I have no problem withdrawing that amendment with the understanding that if something around this is moving forward, it'll be brought right back to us and we can take action at that time. Does that make sense?
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Burney, I do plan on bringing the other aerial spray bills to the commission. I know there is interest in them.
Okay, so that's a yes. So I can withdraw the amendment under those circumstances, or if, Mr. Chair.
You can do whatever you want, please.
Yeah, I will do that. I will withdraw the amendment based upon the discussion and the understanding that this is an important issue to the board as aerial spraying moves forward.
Okay, is that acceptable? Okay, so with the proposed amendment withdrawn, we now have the motion to approve the package as presented, including the monitor on House Bill 2493 and changing the, is that right?
Yeah,
changing Senate Bill 379 to monitor. Okay, and then the Legislative Committee is meeting on Thursday of this week. So with that, we have a vote unless anyone wants to be recognized, we'll have a vote on the motion and the second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. All commissioners present voting, and motion's adopted. Okay, Mr. Kyler, sorry for the delay.
No worries.
And thank you for your great work on this. And I may keep going. You can go. Have a good one. I just want to continue our discussion briefly on the legislative front, and that is that one of the challenges that Lane County has is, of course, we have legislative issues with our local governments, with our national government, with our state government. What we've just been through, which we'll do again probably next week, is another round of our views on important state legislation. But keep in mind that the Legislative Committee does have authority over all of our legislative, what other partner agencies, governments are doing. And I certainly welcome other ways of trying to go through a mash of bills, but this is a fairly common process to have commissioners have strong views on some things, but generally we can agree on most of it. So I'm glad we did that today. Okay, now next I'd like to call on our administrator for any advice you have on what's the road map currently.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, what you could do is take up consent. We do have some staff here for the consent item. The staff for the second consent item had to leave, but I can address that from the staff perspective. I have information if you want to do both, or you could take up the Public Works one in the afternoon, your choice, and then move to item 7B and D and E.
Okay.
If you would.
Chair, I had more remonstrance.
Oh, and you have more remonstrance. Well, why don't we do does the remonstrance relate to the consent calendar? I wanted to get
It does not.
the staff. Okay. So at this time, we'll move to item 6 on our agenda. That is the consent calendar. And we have requests to pull items 6A2, which is the investment policies order, and 6C5, which is the Transportation Advisory Committee matter. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar without those two items.
So moved. Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Burney to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion carries 5-0. All commissioners voting aye. Okay, now Ms. Mooney, if you could come up here. Item 6A2, order 19-03-12-01 in the matter of readopting lane manual provision relating to investment policies. And with us here is our budget manager, Christine Moody. And could you introduce your colleague?
Yes, this is Andrew B. Miller. He is in finance services. And so Robert Tentel is the name on the agenda item. He is out of town, so that is why we are here.
Okay, and I had some questions on this. I know Commissioner Burney did. Okay, my question is regarding this item. I wrote my question out here. In the follow-up, it says none. And I didn't want to provoke a giant discussion of investment policies today under the consent calendar, but I did want to know if we could have this item brought up in July or August after the budget's done, and to have a more expansive discussion of Lane County's investment policies and what flexibility the Board of Commissioners has. But I really didn't want to hold up this meeting for that, nor did I want to put staff on the I didn't want to ask a whole bunch of questions where staff isn't ready for those questions.
And maybe,
What about that follow-up? Because it says none in the materials.
Right, yes, if the board requests follow-up, we can absolutely do that, right. This is just the annual adoption of the policies, which happens every year, annually. Maybe I could just make a brief comment on the agenda item, since we are discussing it, is just that Lane County's policies do follow the ORS statutes. They are, Oregon does have fairly conservative investment policies. The goals that the policies look for are safety, liquidity, and yield. So we want to make sure that those funds, which are our reserves, do not lose anything. There is the investment report that I think is emailed to the board also, that is out on our website under financial services if anyone is interested in looking at that report. 2018 is the most recent one, which was just adopted. And this does go through finance and audit too before coming to the board.
Okay, Commissioner Burney.
My reason was to talk about this without having to delay anything too. What seems like eons ago, when I was running for county commissioner, it wasn't that long ago, I had the opportunity to review in great detail the investment portfolio, the instruments, the maturity dates, the mix. I had the opportunity to speak to a couple of senior finance people in the private sector here about that. And I want to just share my issues and concerns, and then when we do come back to the discussion, whenever that is, in June or July, you're more prepared, it doesn't catch you. One of the consistent themes that this Board of Commissioners will hear from me is local, local, local. We did it with the community benefits agreement, and so as it relates to this, I just want to see, it looked like the vast majority of funds from Lane County residents, surplus funds to county government, are invested outside of Lane County. And I want to look at how much of that, utilizing the same risk mitigation criteria, et cetera, we can move into Lane County. Commissioner Buck and I were at the county college. We're given an Oregon County Treasurer Primer by this amazing lady, I forget her name. I think she's the treasurer of Marion County, but I don't really recall. But anyway, and in that, we looked at investment of surplus funds of political subdivisions and approved instruments. She shared with us that one of her approved instruments before the big crash about 10 years ago was a couple $100 million in Bear Stearns. That to me doesn't suggest significant risk mitigation criteria, although she was able to get that back unscathed, fortunately. And she and I drilled down, and she agreed with me that as we looked at these criteria, we actually could change some of them. So I know that's outside of our county, but I just want to let you know that my interest is how much of that portfolio can we move to Lane County? How much is possible under existing criteria? I know, for example, we can take every local bank, credit union, et cetera, that has federal deposit loan insurance or whatever you call that, up to $250,000, and we can put $250,000 insured in every local finance agency that we have. That's within, so that's where I was coming from. I just wanted to share that with you. It also is of concern to me because almost by definition, investment in Wall Street companies are earth depleting, and that's a concern of mine also. So those are the things I will bring up, and I wanted to let you know that, not to get us off process here, but to help frame a discussion after we approve this year's budget. Thank you. Thank you.
So I think you get an idea of maybe a work session on this topic. And just to add to what Commissioner Burney mentioned, I met with some of the investment vice presidents at Selco and Oregon Community Credit Union, and they expressed interest in a policy change comparable to what Commissioner Burney was discussing, at least as it applies to credit unions. And I do know from my legislative work, the Oregon Credit Union League has a list of every credit union in Oregon, and of course, many of them are located in Lane County. And so if, for example, that $250,000 amount, I know we're usually talking about amounts much larger than that, but if we could contact those credit unions with that level of insurance, that would be another thing we could do to try to bring those funds not only locally, but in a more, maybe perhaps a safer investment. So, yeah, go ahead.
I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, I'm done. I think Christine's got the memo here.
I just want to let you guys know the other reason relates to just the multiplier, right? I mean, if dollars are invested locally, they're reinvested locally, and there's a multiplier effect. So I'm just thinking of that. And I want to share with you that my baby was a junior partner in Merrill Lynch here. He was the second top producer in the Pacific Northwest, and his focus was green investment. So I know enough to speak the language, but I don't know enough to know what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
So it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Bozevich to approve Order 19-03-12-01. And is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, go to vote. All those in favor, please vote aye.
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 All those opposed, please vote no. Motion carries 5-0. And thank you very much to both of you, and we'll look forward to trying to fit that into the post-budget and even post-budget recovery period for Ms. Moody. And thank you very much. Okay, we're next up, and Ms. Vartanian, are you present?
Yeah, she's
Nope.
not able to be here. They had,
Okay.
the public works staff had to leave. So if you want to take it up at 1:30, we can, or in the afternoon session. Or
She'll
I
be
can
here
answer.
later today, right?
We can ask her to be back, yeah. And then Oren Schumacher and Peggy Kepler, who also have knowledge of this, will be back.
Okay, is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we will hold for later in the day, item 6C5, the Transportation Committee part of the consent calendar. That'll be held later in today's meeting. And now, Mr. Administrator, what's your recommendation on our next item?
Let's go to 7B, if you would. We have staff here for 7B, D,
Okay.
and E.
Okay, B, D, and E. Okay. So 7B, we'll call up item 7B on our agenda at this time. Order 19-03-12-08 in the matter of approving a work authorization of $319,705 for installation of temporary parking facilities at the new courthouse site and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the work authorization. Mike Penwell, Capital Projects Manager, is here. And I just want to say thank you for all the good work you're doing on this, and please proceed.
Actually, I'll start. I apologize. I wasn't sure if you were going to hear it now or after lunch. So this is really, what I'm trying to do is tee this agenda item up, excuse me, so that you have a better understanding of the downtown parking situation. You might already have a pretty good understanding of the downtown parking situation, but really what we're trying to do with this particular agenda item is develop the future courthouse site for temporary parking that will then be a stopgap measure for really the challenges that we are seeing around parking. Excuse me. So a little bit of history around downtown parking. You have seen some development going on the OB property that we own, Lane County owns. You will be seeing some development going on in across the street from that for the Homes for Good property. So both of those lots were surface parking lots, and took away, let me look. We lost 100 spaces as a result of that development and the development that's going to continue. We gained some spaces, temporary spaces though. And so what we are doing with the Roll Park facility is really an opportunity to address that gap in parking services that we need to provide in the short term, give us a little bit more time to develop long-term parking solutions. Excuse me, I've got something stuck in my throat. Long-term parking solutions that will then really aid us in the development, with future development in downtown Eugene. So I'm going to stop there, let Mike talk about the facility itself, try and get whatever is stuck in my throat unstuck. Sorry.
I'll talk about the product itself. Roll Park is a very innovative solution to temporary parking. It's a geotextile fabric that's rolled out over a prepared compacted gravel base. It then can be painted with traffic markings and so on. The particular type we're using here is engineered for 3 to 5 years of expected life. It is a porous, pervious membrane. It's got environmental benefits in that it allows the stormwater to drain through while it filters out pollutants and absorbs them in the filter fabric, and allowing the stormwater to go through into the gravel base below. Because of the temporary use, there's no permitting required. There's no stormwater treatment required because this solution meets those requirements. And based on the parking expectation in terms of use and fees, the break-even would be about 2 years on this product for both the initial installation cost and the minimal maintenance costs that are required during the life of the product. If all goes well with the courthouse project, the start of construction would be about 18 months, so we would recoup most of the costs. If the time frame to starting the courthouse is longer, then we would recoup all of the costs. If there's still some life left in the Roll Park product, it can be rolled up and used elsewhere as well. I think that's the main thing, is to provide a useful temporary use for that site, so it's not just a fenced vacant lot like it's been for the past couple of years.
Okay, any questions or a motion to approve? Commissioner Bozovich?
So I'll move approval of Order 1903-1208 in the matter of approving a work authorization for $319,705 for installation of temporary parking facilities at the new courthouse site and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the work authorization.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Bozovich, seconded by Commissioner Buck, to approve Order 19-03-12-08 as presented. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I really think this is a great use of that lot while we're waiting for the construction to begin of the courthouse. And I also think it solves temporarily a really difficult issue, which is downtown parking capacity, which with the initiation of the projects down at 6th and Oak, with the expansion of the Market District and the upcoming Homes for Good project, we've lost a significant amount of surface parking in that area. So this will help replace some of that. And I know it's got the full support of a lot of downtown merchants. I think we've received a couple letters recently. So really looking forward to this moving ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
Just as an aside and briefly, this is illustrative of the decisive nature of Lane County government in my experience. Having worked with the state and worked with the city of Eugene for 10 years, it really is refreshing to me that when we have an opportunity to take advantage of an asset, we take advantage of that asset. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
How long have we had this lot?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Longer than our emergency manager has worked here.
In my previous business, I used to have to look at all sorts of new technology to solve problems. and I saw fascinating stuff, although we could only go with what was commercially proven and financeable. I'm just curious, from what you've seen, is this like the coolest type of surface you could put under these circumstances? It seems like it meets a lot of objectives. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yes, it's a very innovative product that is, from all indications. There's this is from the website, just showing a little bit so you can see some of the preparation and how it's rolled out and so on, just to get a little bit of a feel for the product. They roll it out, then it's the seams are heat welded. The perimeter is anchored down with these curb pieces that also serve as wheel stops. There's a little bit of strip of pavement that's poured where it meets the sidewalk and the road at the entrances and exits, and then it's vehicle ready after that. Meets ADA requirements.
Yeah. Its lifetime is only 3 years?
For this one, they're different grades, but because of the timeline and the cost, that we've chosen the lowest grade, which is 3 to 5 years.
Can you, if it has significant life left, can you cut it up and put it different places in the county,
Yes,
in
that's
areas
what
that?
we're told, yes, it can be reused.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. All commissioners voting yes. Thank you so much. That's great. Okay, next we have item 7E. Oh, not 7E, excuse me, that's 7D. 7D. Order 19-03-12-10 in the matter of directing the publication of a Lane County voters pamphlet for the May 21, 2019 election and appointing a committee to write an explanatory statement that is impartial, simple, and understandable statement explaining the measure to construct a new county courthouse and its effect. With us to discuss this topic, Jeff Kincaid, Management Analyst, and welcome, Mr. Kincaid.
Thank you, Chair Sorensen. This item is really two pieces of action brought forth from your direction provided at the February 26th meeting, where you voted to direct staff to produce a voters pamphlet. So the two individual pieces are to formally direct staff. Lane Code 2.630 actually requires that the board by order direct staff to do the voters pamphlet, and it also governs who will be drafting that voters pamphlet. So the committee that drafts the voters pamphlet must also be appointed by the board. We have provided 3 names per your direction earlier. And this board order will accomplish both of those tasks. So there's a lot of detail on this process. It's not very exciting, but essentially this is carrying out formally the guidance you provided on February 26th.
Okay, any questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve order 19-03-12-10. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Commissioner Bozovich.
Just real quick, I stated last board meeting why I wasn't supportive of voters pamphlet. This order also includes appointing the explanatory committee, so I will be supporting this order, but I still believe that we are putting our staff under considerable duress and still object to the idea that we are putting a full voters pamphlet instead of just an informational brochure, which would have allowed for arguments for and against the courthouse project, but not for every single board and water board, school board, et cetera. So just know that my vote in support of this is mostly about supporting the appointment of the committee, explanatory statement committee.
Okay, further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please vote no. Vote is 5-0. All commissioners voting in approval. The order is adopted. And we're now ready to go to the letter on the item 7E. and that is the letter to the Oregon Country Fair regarding a request to convene meetings to discuss mitigating impacts of the Oregon Country Fair. With us to discuss this is Mr. Jeff Kincaid, our management analyst. Mr. Kincaid wrote a draft in response to our consideration of the ordinance last year and earlier this year, and I made some modifications to that letter, and rather than including on the consent calendar where there might be concerns that about it, I thought it'd be best to bring this back to have the board discuss it. You'll note that I've been, in the letter, I've been a little more active in putting more information in the letter about what we would like the Oregon Country Fair to do. I'm not putting this on our staff, I'm putting it on them because I think that they have a responsibility in this area to make sure that not only this fair, but future fairs come off as peacefully as possible, and that there's a large number of people camping out there. We did not learn the extent of that when we had our meetings, but we think it's pretty substantial. So this gives them an opportunity to meet with the stakeholders. I've named the stakeholders to be at least invited to for them to work on, and I've asked them to get this done in 2 months. Incidentally, in the time it's taken us, I think I would like to request that we make the letter dated today rather than February 26th. But other than that, that's what I put together.
Thank you. So the original intent of our public hearing and our ordinance was about addressing the issue of some of the campgrounds that have become events in themselves and gatherings in themselves rather than just purely temporary campgrounds. And it's really the owners of those properties and the people that run those campgrounds' responsibility about whether or not they're causing issues for the neighborhood. I'm a little concerned that this letter places the onus of controlling private parties on the country fair's responsibility. I believe the country fair folks have done an excellent job of trying to help coordinate some compliance from those campgrounds, but they have no stick. So I'm a little concerned that the tone of the letter places too much burden on the country fair folks. And that's my only concern about the way the letter's written. I do know that just the fact that we propose that ordinance has already caused several meetings of the off-site campground owners and the country fair folks and the city of Veneta and some other interested parties to try and look at resolving some of those issues. And one of the things I promised some of those fair folks is if they need to work with ODOT, I would be their go-between with ODOT because I've got a very strong relationship with the area manager. But I'm all for sending something to the country fair, but I just hope that we are doing that with the understanding that they do not control those off-site campgrounds.
And Commissioner, I totally agree, and I just wanted to be supportive of you worked hard on these ordinances. I didn't agree with them, but now I guess I'm taking the view that, well, there's a big problem out there, and the extent of it we don't know, but obviously forestry's involved, ODOT's involved, the country fair's involved, and we're just asking that they do this stuff. You're right, it is, we do want them, I mean, the tone of the letter is we do want them to do it. Yeah. And they have no control over those people. They have no control over the state government agencies. Of course, rarely do we. Yeah. And so, that's the reason I toyed with the idea of putting it in their hands. And if not, then we will go back to whatever regulatory approaches we have.
And we still have yet to hear from legal counsel on the question I asked about our permit authority to begin with.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm waiting still yet to hear from in an exec session or some future.
And this doesn't bind us to do anything. It just asks them to do it. And if they don't want to do it and they can't do it, hey, It's hard.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I just wanted to express my concern that we're placing an undue burden on the country fair when the country fair has done a lot to try and control issues out there. They made a little bit of a mistake last year. They let a concert go past midnight that shouldn't have gone past midnight, that was actually on the country fairgrounds, and I think they understand that mistake on Saturday night.
And I'm certainly very supportive of the Oregon Country Fair. Go ahead, Commissioner Bernie.
I've reread this letter with what you said in mind, so I'm asking you how you would change it, because I think I don't think it places undue burden. How would you change it? I'm good with the letter. But
I guess I'm just a little concerned. It seems like we're request that the OCF do this and the OCF do that. I'm just wondering, maybe the request, I'm not sure exactly the word to use, but that, I don't know how to amend it to be softer, where we're asking for their voluntary efforts in making a better event, is what we're actually, what I think we're actually trying to do is we would like you, as the probably most central organized piece of this huge event called the Oregon Country Fair, to voluntarily convene these meetings and hopefully resolve these issues. That's rather than the board, request that OCF provide information, the board intends, it just seems a little bit stronger than it
Would it be softer?
Yeah.
I think it's a great letter, and if you felt it could be softer with a couple of words, Mr. Chair, I'm good with that too.
I don't want to wordsmith right now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to express that concern, just so that, I just wanted to express that concern so that folks from the country fair, if they go back and watch the video, they'll understand that our intent really wasn't to place undue burden on them, that we're really asking for them to help us resolve a community issue out there.
And I agree.
Mr. Chair, to the motion.
Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. Very briefly, the term requests doesn't require. So the board also requests. It does not say the board requires. So if the country fair finds that either onerous or even simply difficult to do, they could simply say we cannot do that.
That was my idea of putting requests. Okay, any other questions, comments? So I'll entertain a motion to approve the letter as presented.
So moved.
I guess with the date. It says February 26th.
So moved.
Okay, so with the date change. Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the action item to approve the letter to the Oregon Country Fair. And I also want to really emphasize, we are not in a position to make demands on the Oregon Country Fair. We don't want to make any demands on the Oregon Country Fair. We want them to follow up on what they said they would do, which is to be a reasonable player in the process of convening all these different interests to try to mitigate the impacts of the fair. And there's a lot of complexity there, and our ordinances rarely deal with a lot of complexity. They usually just deal with a one-shot thing, and that isn't always the best way to solve problems. So I'm hoping that this will be entered into in a positive spirit, and hopefully some good comes of this. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of sending the letter, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Motion carries 5-0 to send the letter. And thank you so much, Mr. Kincaid. And we're now ready to move to back to our agenda adjustments. And Mr. Administrator, do you have any suggestions on the remaining time? It's 12:07 p.m. I usually, tell people that they can leave around noon.
Mr. Dingle is here for 8B, so I don't know if you want to take that up, and then you probably,
Maybe I'll ask the commissioners if they've got anything. None of them ran out the room, but I just want to it's my mistake that we went past noon. I just want to own that, because I usually like to get us out of here at noon and back in work at 1:30. So is everyone okay to take what has been estimated to be a 5-minute item? Is that correct?
Or less. First reading.
Okay, so let's go with it. Item 8B, first reading, setting the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 19-02 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 8 to bring the rules governing public property in the downtown Eugene area into alignment and declaring an emergency. This sets the public hearing, if approved, at March 2nd at 1:30 p.m. With us to discuss this first reading is Stephen Dingle, Lane County Council.
One correction, Chair. It's April 2nd, not March 2nd.
Oh, April 2nd. Thank you.
Second hearing. Very briefly, this is very straightforward. The board previously did this, and this is necessitated by the swap in the property between the city and the county for the butterfly lot and the lot that was just under discussion. It's also consistent with the agreement we entered into with the city of Eugene to develop the town square and to bring uniformity in terms of the regulations.
Okay. Do any commissioners have any questions or want to make a motion to set the second reading?
Chair.
Yes.
So we've had lots of testimony about evening meetings and evening public comment. I'm looking to staff here. Would it be possible to do this public hearing as a 6 p.m. public hearing on the April 2nd instead of a 1:30, and have, convene our meeting and maybe at 5:30 to take public comment as our once a month in the evening public comment session?
As I look skyward towards Ms. Jones, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
Is there a budget?
I'm looking towards.
The agenda team's been discussing that, and I'm certainly open to that. The precise date, since we are setting a public hearing, we might want to,
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the question before I offer to make a motion, because I think, one, this involves downtown.
Yep.
And it involves the issue of curfew, which I think is going to generate a fair amount of public that wants to testify. And second, it might be also an opportunity, because we have an item that we could deal with in the evening, then we can also offer a general public comment session, an evening session. So I was trying to do two things. I know this is going to have some interest, and I also know that we've been asked multiple times about providing the evening session. Just to have an evening session for public comment doesn't make a lot of sense, because then, there's really not a reason for people to come necessarily. So I just thought, if that's a
So could we do 5:30, Mr. Administrator?
Or I think the hearing, we might want to start at 6.
6, yeah.
And then maybe start public comment at 5:30 or even earlier.
Oh, like have a public comment at 5 and then?
Yeah, and then start the hearing at
5:30.
Or 5:30.
Be good, because it gives people some time if they end the day at 5.
Okay.
So 6 p.m. on the second works.
What do you think, Ms. Vice Chair?
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So go ahead and make your motion, Commissioner Bozovich.
So then I'd like to approve the first reading, and I just dropped my number here. The first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1902 to April 2nd, 2019 at 6 p.m.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Bozovich, second by Commissioner Burney, to approve the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 19-202 for, did you say 5:30? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. on Tuesday, April 2, 2019 in Harris Hall. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries 5-0. And we will pick this item back up at 6 p.m. on April 2.
And Chair, just very briefly in terms of announcements, I know we still have an executive session today, and my estimate is, looking at the calendar, probably sometime between 3:15 and 3:30, and remind you that we have a lengthy executive session tomorrow morning beginning at 9 o'clock.
Any good news?
Very good. Okay, and now, Mr. Administrator, what's your opinion of us having a recess now until 1:30? Okay, very good. So at this time, we will be in recess till 1:30. We'll come back at Harris Hall at 1:30. Thank you so much.